across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. I'm with you for the next 3 hours, getting you up to speed with everything in today's news. Now, shortly, we'll be crossing live to Andy Burnham because he is about to give a speech on his social care plans for England. Now, I think the big question isn't whether or not we need social care. Clearly we do. We've got lots of hospitals straining under the weight of especially elderly people who are trapped in hospital beds because they cannot be sent home. And as the population gets older, the price tag goes up and up and up. And so making the case for needing some sort of national social care service of itself doesn't seem like a bad idea. But what we really want to know is, where is the £18 billion price tag? Well, where's that going to come from? Who is paying for it? We have it suggested to us that the bigwigs of Whitehall, the apparatchiks in our civil service, have been coming up with various ways in which this could be funded. And the plans could involve a 1.8% tax on all earnings above £6,240. Paid by workers over the age of 34. So unlike national insurance, that actually funds current government spending, the fund would be invested on behalf of working-age people to use for the cost of care when they get old. OK, well, you know, you're paying throughout your life and then get that at the end so that someone can make sure that you live in dignity. But here's the rub. OK, £18 billion. I often thought that charity started at home, that the job of a government was to ensure that its own people are looked after. Well, apparently not, because when it comes to spending our money, they would much rather give it to people who weren't born here, who have not contributed to the system and yet seem to use us as some sort of ATM. Let me give you an example. The current bill for housing so-called asylum seekers, they're not asylum seekers, they're chancers, they're terrorists, they're rapists, they're people who come to try and work on the black market. Maybe the odd, I don't know, 0.5% might be genuine asylum seekers. But otherwise, there we go. That is estimated to be anywhere between £5 billion and £8 billion a year. The price actually goes up when you look at all the legal fees for people who keep challenging in court deportations. The foreign aid budget, £9 billion. Foreigners using the NHS every year and not paying for it, well, that's estimated to be £2 billion. Foreigners receiving universal credit. That's right, welfare payments. People who are not from this country, have not contributed to this country, were not born in this country, and yet want us to pay for their existence in this country. That is £12 billion a year. And foreigners in social housing, that's right, the ones that we give free accommodation to, because, well, clearly they deserve it more than we deserve to have adult social care. That is £3.6 billion in London alone. You tot up all of those figures and you have £35 billion per annum, which, if you think about it, the 18 billion ticket for social care, well, it's about double that, isn't it? So how about, Mr. Burnham, you talk about immigration for once. Every other topic seems to be in your remit, but not our borders, not the illegal crossings that you seem to think are doing really well. You say Labour's plan is working. What plan? What was the plan? Smash the gangs? Oh, that's right. I'm looking through all the newspapers and yet another people trafficker's been thrown in prison. It isn't working. In fact, yesterday marks the first day that a vessel set off from France and managed to get all the way to Eastbourne, for crying out loud. Eastbourne! The journeys are just getting bigger. The French are doing nothing. You're doing nothing. Well, you're not even talking about it. You're just gaslighting us that all of this stuff is perfectly normal. Well, it is not. So let us wait and see what the Prime Minister has to say. But I'm not particularly happy about having to pay almost 2% more in tax when we could be getting that money from other people that my taxes seem to be paying for already. So there you are. Benedict, how are you, my darling? Benedict Spencer's going to be with me in the studio for a full 3 hours.
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm a bit weary, but I'm OK.
A bit weary.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you don't seem weary. You seem up for the fight. You seem.
Do I seem ebullient?
Ever so slightly, yes. Much more so than me. I'm slowly melting into a puddle because,
It's hot
of course,
in here.
yeah, the latest round of heat wave is it's coming for us.
Do not moan about the heat wave.
Oh,
Don't
I will
scare
moan
that
about
heat wave
that.
away.
I will moan about the heat wave. I'm fully fed up of it. I've had enough. It's outstayed its welcome.
Don't.
It absolutely
hear
has.
it.
Absolutely has. It needs to be. London is the perfect city for it to be about 24, 25. When it gets to about 33, no. That's why we went to the colonies. We didn't want the colonies here, temperature-wise. That's why we went overseas, and we could send people who enjoyed.
We got the colonies now, so we may
That's
as well
why
have their climate as well.
You know, you have like the separation of powers. Well, we had the separation of climates in Britain, in the British Empire. That was better back then. I dislike this very much. But as you can see, I've come dressed for the occasion. Jeremy Kyle doesn't particularly like the suit, but maybe you will.
I did. I like that suit quite a lot, actually.
There we go. Thank you.
It feels very summery.
It's the wrong thing to say on the radio, isn't it? I'm wearing a tobacco-coloured suit for anybody that can't see.
Is that what we call that?
That
tobacco?
is what we call, yes.
Okay.
That's the technical term.
Okay, not camel colour.
He said, no, camel is slightly lighter, and Jeremy said vomit, and that made me slightly concerned for what it was he'd eaten the night before, if this is the colour as vomit. But that's not actually what we're here to talk about.
That is not what we're here to talk about.
Though
Right,
we
we
could.
are, of course, waiting to cross over to Andy Burnham, who is going to be making a speech on his plan for a national social care service. I mean, what do you make of this? I think there's a perfectly valid argument to say we're going to need this. We keep being told we've got an ageing population, we're living longer, although actually that's no longer true. Apparently our generation's life expectancy is 10 years lower.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me. On top of everything else, my life expectancy's going down?
Yeah.
Well, that was the only thing I had to look forward to, was that I might live into a good, ripe old age. But it turns out, no. The crushing weight of responsibility of paying for everybody else is also going to rob me of those sort of twilight years as well. I mean, just instinctively, I'm always suspicious, as anybody should be, of anything that has the words national social in the first line. So, you know, just off the bat, it doesn't strike good vibes. Obviously, though, we do need to find a way of paying...
I've only just got that.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
it took me a while. I told you I was weary.
But I'm sat here in a brown suit. I can't necessarily make these kind of jokes. But, you know, the thing is, obviously we need to find a way to pay for this sort of thing. Yeah. It is something that's slowly starting to strangle a lot of public finances and the way that things like the NHS, for instance, work. It has been used as justification for bringing in a great wave of people from overseas to try to staff social care. And ultimately, this is a burden that we can't sort of just continue pretending isn't going to cost a lot of money. We are going to have to find ways of funding it, ways of managing it, because the actual ways of managing it currently don't work. As you've sort of alluded to, the amount of bed blocking that goes on in the NHS as a result of this, the system doesn't work. I'm sorry to say, though, it's going to mean that things are going to have to be cut from elsewhere, because we can't simply continue to borrow and tax and borrow and tax and just hope that everything works out well, because you're killing growth. You can't have these nice, shiny first world society systems if you don't have the wealth to pay for it. And there are going to be lots of people who are sat there thinking, but this is an incredibly wealthy country. It was. Now, relative to countries like, I don't know, third world countries like Somalia or Argentina, maybe, yes, this is a wealthy country, but it's not as wealthy as it used to be. It's not generating the wealth that it used to be. If you want to get back to being a country that can launch something like a national health service and it work, you need to continue to be prosperous. You can't decide you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul and just hope that everything just stays as it is. We've had the experience of thousands and thousands of high net worth individuals already leaving this country, which is ironic, because then the government turns around and goes, oh, don't worry, everybody, we've brought net migration down because we're, you know, chasing all the millionaires away. But we've had that experience. A lot of the money is now leaving this country. Where is the money for it, therefore, going to come from? It's going to mean awkward conversations for Andy Burnham, who right now is doing the thing of trying to come out and say, I'm going to be optimistic and I'm going to promise you this and that and all these other wonderful things. The crux is going to come when he has to find the money for certain things, and certain areas are going to not get the money that they necessarily want. Does he have the gall to turn around to his backbenchers and say, this benefit isn't going to get paid for, or this particular service isn't going to get paid for? I don't know if he's the man with the stones for that.
What do you make of the fact that he has sort of sent a political olive branch out to other parties, saying, let's all get together, let's have consensus on this issue, it is so pressing, we need to discuss this, and forget party lines. And yet, he didn't invite Reform UK, who are, if it ain't going to be a Labour government, it's likely to be a Reform one. I mean, it's just, to me, he actually put a video out on social media, being the big I am, going like, you know, this is such a serious subject, we shouldn't have political point scoring when it comes to elderly care, but I'm not going to invite Reform UK to the meeting. Everyone else but Reform UK. I mean, it's pathetic.
It's because ultimately the major parties, I think, are trying to sideline reform. They understand the threat that reform poses to them. The tricky thing about all of this is reform's very existence and the fact that they've polled quite so well, I think, is a sign that traditional voting patterns have already been shattered. Now, this is something that will actually hurt reform at some point as well, because they can't rely on the same sort of institutional loyalty that the Tories and Labour milked for so long. Reform doesn't have that, which means actually that reform has to be better. It has to be better than the Tories or Labour ever were at their very peak in order to keep people on side. And this, I think, is what you're starting to see in the slight dip in reform's polling right now, which is that it doesn't have the same sort of loyalty, which means that voters can potentially go from reform to I don't know or elsewhere. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though, actually, because it will keep reform honest, or it should do long term. But I think people can see what's going on with the way that, you know, you've got Kemi Badenoch, who, you know, broadly I think is doing a pretty good job, but is still doing the whole sort of, I want to work with Andy Burnham on XYZ, and then Burnham sort of returning the favour. People are not stupid. They can kind of see that, and they do understand, well, hang on, aren't you two people supposed to be diametrically opposed, and aren't you going to be tearing each other's throats out of PMQs for the next couple of months? I don't think anybody's going to buy this idea that they're actually coming together to find a solution to social care. And old habits die hard. Just because right now reform is the punch bag for both of these parties doesn't mean that they're going to be able to resist knocking chunks out of each other. Let's say reform's polling dips quite aggressively, like the Greens has. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's say that it does. Well, then your biggest opponent isn't reform anymore. Then it's back to being the Tories, or Labour if you are the Tories, at which point they then turn in on each other, and everybody then turns around and going, so nothing's really changed. You are still the same old, same old. You don't really have any solutions, and we're back to the usual sort of Punch and Judy politics. So I think people can see the attempts to isolate reform, a bit like people could see in Clacton, all of them going, well, we're not going to stand. You know, none of us are going to put this up because, you know, this isn't a serious by-election.
He said the C
At which
word.
point, I did, didn't I?
I know, he said the C word. Does that... We might have to play the magic video at some point.
Do you know what the
soon.
fortunate thing with that is, though? Because very few people are standing, the candidate list is relatively small. So it's not the sort of standard thing where you have to read out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
No, it's the opposite. Every man and their dog standing, other than the other political party.
Oh, I thought that... how many are there now?
That's a long list.
I sort of clocked out when it was obviously the joke candidate, and then there was a second joke candidate.
Oh, right, you haven't heard it. Well,
how many more
probably,
are there?
I think there's about 30. I think there's 30
you've got
candidates.
To be kidding me.
And we've had to pre-record it. Jeremy has been in charge of the one reading the list of all the candidates. So we just hit a button, play the video, and off we go. And
somebody
I can have a minute and a half nap.
Should really warn me of the totalizer, because I don't think it's unfair to clock out after the second joke candidate announces that they're standing, and that's it. Somebody should really say, right, it's up to this many now, so please, for the love of God, don't say the word.
Some of the names are beautiful.
So
anyway,
you're actually going to slowly enjoy reading it out, is what you're going to say?
I'm not reading it out. If we do it, if we have to play it, it will be Jeremy's beautifully mellifluous...
Yes.
mellifluous reading skills. Talking about reading skills, actually, while we wait for our new mayor of Great Britain, the mannequin mayor. Honestly, does that man go into, like, Mr. Ben's house and open up his magic box? Because he seems to always be cosplaying in something. He's always got some sort of, you know, his black T-shirt look, his suit look, his jogging kit look, his high-vis jacket look. It's like, wow, what's he going to wear next?
What I would say is I quite liked the mail splash about that jacket that cost an awful lot of money. The thing was, up until that point, I've been sort of sat there going, oh, he's just wearing a T-shirt, this is so childish, this is so undignified. And then he was pictured wearing a private white bomber jacket or something like that, or a parka, and I suddenly thought, oh, actually, that's not bad. I quite like that. I'm a big fan of people spending outsized amounts of money on very aggressively British-made clothes. And this is one of,
British-made?
this is one of those companies that sources absolutely everything. Not quite locally, but it's one of those very much, you know, I mean, clues in the name. It's, you know, named after a Victoria Cross recipient. It's very much a, you know, this is a British-made kind of thing. And it's so expensive because it pays people a proper amount of money to actually make the clothes. So, I was sort of, having been sat there going, oh, he's sloppy, he's, you know, slapdash, why is he not dressing properly? And then he wore that jacket, and I thought, do you know what? Actually, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all, because somebody's getting a proper wage for that.
What I do mind is he seems to be a man more obsessed with making videos for TikTok than he is on discussing the big issues facing the country. We are still, of course, waiting for our Prime Minister to come and explain what he wants to do about adult social care, and hopefully he'll tell us how he plans to pay for it, or how we have to pay for it. But at the moment, it's Baroness Louise Casey, who is going to be leading a review into the social care sector in England, who is currently doing a little speech in what looks like an old people's home. Now, meanwhile, I don't know whether you've seen these comments made by our new Education Secretary, Lucy Powell, when it comes to spelling and grammar. Because she has decided that, well, it's not necessary to know how to spell anymore. People who leave junior school shouldn't be tested on their spelling and grammar, because she says the spelling test is too obscure. She says that actually kids need to learn how to communicate in written, oral and other forms, because that doesn't involve spelling and grammar. You can just make noises and, you know, put squiggly... Just to use emojis, why don't you? We've got an emoji Prime Minister, after all. But then she says, you know, they shouldn't get drawn into some kinds of specific grammar. And she basically criticised the ridiculous assessments and said they were being used to micromanage children. What? Making sure kids leave school able to spell? Do you want to do the last year's SPAG test for Key Stage 2?
Oh, that could be fun. This could be quite... I'm happy to subject myself to embarrassment. All right.
Do you want to know what, you know, the ridiculous, obscene, micromanaging spelling test involves?
All right.
So here's the spelling script.
Oh, dear.
So, we think Andy Burnham's good. There you go, saved by Burnham.
By the Prime Minister.
Here he is. Here's the Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Lovely welcome there. I'm just looking around the room. I see a lot of faces who've been on this journey with me for a long time. Many of you, you know who you all are. You've probably got a feeling of déjà vu, don't you? You've probably got that, but don't have that, because this time we're going to do it, right? We're going to do it. You don't take anything on without doing it, do you, Louise? So let's make sure we do. And lots of new faces as well. Fantastic to be with you all this morning. I was going to speak from notes, but for the reasons Louise just gave, you can't, can you? You can't speak from notes. I've just got to speak from the heart when it comes to this issue, because it is very, very personal for me right now and for my family. We've kind of lived it in the last few years from the inside, and the only thing you can do is talk from that. Why you can't do this job, in my view, without bringing all of that to it, and kind of then using that emotion, if you like, to kind of make the change and be brave in making that change. And that's what I intend to do, as I'm going to explain. There's lots I can say about what's wrong with the system. I will come to that, but I want to start with what's good about the system, because sometimes when we talk about social care, we don't do that enough, do we? And I see so much good in terms of the journey that we've been on. And I mean, I'm talking about the people who've cared for my dad. Hundreds of them we've seen and we've watched. You know, when someone in your family is receiving care, you look at everything through new eyes, don't you? You notice things that maybe you didn't notice before, because you watch it so closely and so carefully. And I've just been really, I don't know, overwhelmed by their care, the skill in what they do, the professionalism. It really is incredible, and it's humbling to watch them caring for someone else's dad or someone else's mum. If you think about that, you know, bringing all of that to the care of someone else's relative, it's just an incredible thing, isn't it? That, to me, they should be the best paid people in society, not the worst. And, you know, I just start with that feeling. And I need to say this, because, you know, many people from other countries have been caring for my dad. I want those carers to know we appreciate you. We appreciate what you are doing to support people here. And that really matters that I say that as well. There is so much to be proud of. I mentioned the skill and the care and the professionalism. I watch sometimes how people communicate with my dad, and they're able to catch a kind of a moment of the old character. It kind of just will come out because of the way they draw in the conversation, and that is an amazing talent to have. But also moving from a wheelchair to an armchair, or from there to a bed without distress or discomfort, it is incredibly demanding and skillful what they do, and that needs to be recognised. I also want to recognise the good organisations, care organisations in all sectors, and as Louise said, we are really lucky to be in one today. I visited Jewish Care here in Enfield with the Member of Parliament Sarah 10 years ago, just about, and I remember thinking, well, this is the gold standard, this is how it should be, and we're lucky to have a sister organisation in Manchester called the Fed, leader of Bury Council here today, chair of the LGA. He knows what I mean when I say that's whole person care, Eamon, isn't it? When you know it when you see it, and you see it there at the Fed, you see it here at Jewish Care. I see it at the faith-based charity who run my dad's care home. I see the same. I see good in all sectors. And let's celebrate the good in social care before we turn to the things that we know need to be better. And before we then say, and how have we got to this position? When it comes to the bad, I think there's only one group really to blame, and that's my generation of politicians. It's almost 30 years since the Royal Commission on Social Care. 30 years. And in that time, what did Yvette say? 22 reviews. I mean, it's a major dereliction of public duty that Parliament has not faced up to this, of all challenges, something so fundamental to life as this. It's shameful, to be honest, that politicians have put point scoring before fixing this issue, but that's what's happened. It's created a feeling in Westminster that this is too difficult, and if you take it on, you're taking on too big a political risk. Or how can we have got to a position where it's too difficult to fix the basic care that we give to each other, that fellow human beings receive? I mean, how has Parliament got itself to that position? And there is something here that is a test for the political and the media culture in this country when it comes to this issue, how it's spoken about, how it's reported. It's for everybody. Everybody needs to take on board what is being launched today with this big conversation, because I think everybody needs to engage in it responsibly, needs to remember who they are talking about, what they are talking about, the people who work within it, and to do it respectfully and to do it accurately. I just think that's a really important starting point, and I feel I need to say that. Because the current situation, frankly, is bad for everybody. It's certainly bad for the people who don't get the care that they need. It's estimated today in England around 2 million adults have unmet care needs. Now, think about that for a moment and what that means. I can, again, certainly attest from family experience that it's too hard for the family carers, and the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, was quite right to talk about that on the radio this morning and say how important it is that we see people struggling in their homes looking after a partner or a relative. It can break people if they're kind of left without that support that they need. In fact, it does break people, and that needs to be recognised. It needs to be recognised that people can see everything they've worked for wiped out by the costs of care. Hundreds of thousands of pounds can just disappear paying for care. Adults with disabilities will say that they face very unfair care charges just to live their life. That needs to be recognised. And let me come back to the staff doing what they do on poverty pay. I've been made aware of somebody homeless working in a care setting, living out of a mobile home. Just again, think about that. How can we enable those staff to give a real sense of security to the people they're looking after if they do not have it in their own lives. And it makes what they do all the more remarkable, that they do care in the way that they do. But we cannot take them for granted, and we must not do that. So it's bad for everybody in this, but it's also bad for the National Health Service. And let me just say something about that. Again, I've had experience in the system as it currently is, which is trying to give out care in 15-minute slots, because honestly, that's all that councils say that they can afford for many people. It's fine if the needs are moderate and you can complete the task within that time slot, but what if they're not? What if the needs become moderate or severe and you try and carry out everything within 15 minutes? I can tell you from experience that that can be a recipe for quite significant chaos if you are not careful. And it leaves the staff in a really difficult position, because often what they are told, if they have a problem and they can't complete what they're doing, ring 999. Yeah. Ring 999. And I heard a few kind of yeses in the audience and a few nods. I know, and I'm saying this, there'll be people watching who know what I'm talking about. That can be a really frightening experience, because it often isn't the case that that person needs hospitalisation. In fact, you could say it's the worst place for them to end up. But once that process is underway, it's very difficult to stop the drag of the system into hospital and then everything that comes from that. That's bad for the NHS too and the staff who work there. It's a lose-lose situation, because often people then spend a long time in A&E, a long time in hospital, but then fit to be discharged and can't be discharged. It just is a pressure that the NHS struggles to meet. And look at it in the numbers. Today, or on the latest figures, about 6 million people, just there or thereabouts, over 65, are going to A&E every year. Now, some of those will be from social care settings. If you go back to 2010, it was about half, roughly 3 million. So you can see that change in that period. Last month, 13,600 people were deemed medically fit to be discharged, but couldn't be. That was in an average across the month in England. 3,000 people every single day receiving corridor care. Corridor care. The trade unions now are monitoring corridor care. Do you remember there was a time when that was what you called the winter pressures? Well, these are year-round now, and staff in the NHS are trying to deal with those pressures every single day. And there's growing talk of burnout amongst NHS staff, because the pressure they are trying to deal with is simply too great. And it's not sustainable. If you think about all of those things, then you know the NHS cannot carry on in that position. And let's not have a conversation about social care as though it lives in its own silo. It doesn't live in its own silo. It's intrinsically linked to the National Health Service and what happens there. When I left office as Health Secretary, wasn't all my doing, but 98% of people there or thereabouts were going through A&E within 4 hours. If you look at that figure today, it's about 75%. And there is just no way that we can restore the NHS to the standards that we would all want to see without fixing this issue. We can't do it. So we need to face up to it with a new determination. We need to bring our best game to this, and not the sort of stock in trade of Westminster, business as usual, and just finding a reason to score points rather than actually face up to what's involved here, given that it involves so many vulnerable people, so many underpaid staff, and so many under pressure people in our National Health Service. We need to bring the best of us to solving this issue, because it affects all of us in one way or another. So that brings me then to what I want to announce today. 3 announcements, and you've already got a flavour of some of them, but this is what I've decided to do coming into office, to bring things forward. And the first thing is to ask Baroness Casey Louise to bring forward her review by a year. So working with Yvette and with Angela and other colleagues, we want to expedite that review. We ideally want to do it even sooner, but we've got to be realistic. But if we say a year from now that we have that independent review, then I think we can rise to this challenge with the urgency it requires. So that's the first announcement. And let me also just say something about what I want that review to address. I go back to what we proposed in 2010, and Phil Hope was Minister at that time, a national care service. A national care service. Well, why do we talk about that? Because we need to talk about a system that can become highly integrated with the NHS. Social care is different. It has to be person-centred. If it's not person-centred, like the brilliant care provided here at Jewish Care, then it won't be what people would recognise as social care. You don't want to over-medicalise care, but it has to be very integrated with the rest of the system. It has to be preventative in its character. It has to be person-centred. And that's what we're asking Louise to give us her report on. How do we deliver a national care service in England that sits alongside the National Health Service, works in a similar way, that is highly integrated and can optimise the journey of a patient. If a patient's leaving home to hospital, back as quickly as possible, and there's no delay. We also then ask for a principle of home care wherever possible, so that we have an approach that supports people where they should be and often where they want to be, rather than ending up in a hospital bed. So how do we deliver a national care service?
Well, there we go. I mean, we sat there, didn't we? We've listened to, I don't know, it started off a bit like a wedding speech. It's like, oh, look at all my mates, what a proud day, you've helped me get here, blah, 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 blah. And then there was a sort of load of middle management nothingness. And I think we've only just got to the bit where he's talking about needing a policy, and the policy being about adult social care. And, well, I don't know, we just got a bit bored, frankly. I'm going to play that back when I go to bed tonight. That was quite soporific.
Yeah, I dropped off.
Me too. I actually had made a little nest of my hands on the desk.
Yeah, the thing is, you understand he's trying to do this sort of quite folksy kind of, soft padding into the actual crux of what it is that he wants to say. But my word, does that actually just grate slightly. And again, he's trying to do the whole speak from the heart, not from a script sort of thing. But it's just, it doesn't make for a very good sort of announcement sort of style. You need it to be short, sharp, crisp, get to the point.
Get to the point.
I mean, what
we
time
don't have all day,
what time is it now? It's nearly 25 to 11.
I know. Like this is
what was that? That
easiest first half hour of work I've ever had.
It was both easy, but also kind of very difficult, because you felt your sort of intelligence being bludgeoned into submission slightly as it just wore on and on and on.
I wonder how long he's going to go for.
He's still going. For anybody
He's still going. He's still going, but we just decided he wasn't actually saying anything, so we just decided to
we'll
give
bring
up.
you the bullet points later.
Yeah,
if there are.
You don't need to suffer that anymore.
Subject some poor person to actually go, write this down, what it is that he says. Get it sort of filtered down to maybe 3 top lines. Let us know what it is, and we'll tell you in the next hour, because that's the best thing to do.
Well, at least he put on a suit today.
He is wearing a suit and a tie.
I mean, well done.
Yeah.
Well done there.
He owns more than one tie. That's exciting.
Now, shall we move on? Because that was deeply tedious. We learned absolutely nothing. I had a cat nap. I enjoyed it. But now it's time to get back to business, because we've got other stories to discuss while we wait for Andy Burnham to finish that speech, which I guess might be around, I don't know, 26th of March 2027. At any guess at the rate he's going right now. Let us now move on to the subject of when one should apologise. Should you apologise when you didn't mean to do something, but it affected someone anyway, or do you only apologise when you've willfully done something? Because, if I walk up the street and I happen to bash into somebody, I usually go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but I didn't actually intend to bash into them. maybe I just shouldn't apologise, but bang, and be like, no, didn't mean to, so, you know, F you. So this was apparently Zach Polanski's excuse on Newsnight yesterday. I'm glad, actually, the media are now picking up on this. Nigel Farage has written a fascinating piece in the Mail today, and I must admit I agree with a lot of what he says. I'm not sure I totally agree with reporting the matter to the police. The matter being that a Green Party activist at one of their conferences was wearing a T-shirt with a guillotine on it with the phrase, "We're only making plans for Nigel," which is clearly suggesting that the Green Party's plans is to publicly execute the leader of Reform UK. Zach Polanski reposted this and then quietly took it down. And Zach Polanski says, oh, no, it's not a problem. It's a mistake. I didn't mean to repost it, whatever. I'm going to have to manage my social media a bit better. Nope, the word sorry does not exist in his vocabulary because, let's be fair, everybody on the extreme left are part of the dark triad of narcissism, sociopathy and Machiavellianism. Not exactly the sort of people that apologies often spill forth from. But Nigel Farage points out, of course, that all of this happened in the wake of the brutal and horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe, which, of course, everyone's gone quiet about that now. He also points out that there was this sort of strange, fictional, far-right terrorism plot that was busted in Suffolk, which turned out to be no such thing, and yet the then Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood made quite a lot of capital out of the fake news far-right plot. And Nigel Farage pointed out, look, if I had done this, if someone from Reform UK was wearing a T-shirt with a hangman's noose and said, these are our plans for Andy Burnham, and Nigel Farage had retweeted it, it would be an absolute bun fight among the media, reporting it, vilifying him, demanding his resignation. Two-tier any? It does seem to be so to me. Well, let's speak now to the brilliant Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director of Academy of Ideas, a big fan of free speech, but also, of course, a former Brexit Party MEP alongside Nigel Farage, myself and Anne Widdecombe. Good morning to you, Claire. First of all, what did you make of Polanski yesterday on Newsnight refusing to apologise?
Well, would you believe it? I am less condemnatory of Zach Polanski on the refusing to apologise point than maybe you would think. I'm very worried about the fact that despite the dangerous nature of two-tier, policing of speech, I get very concerned that the instinct of, Nigel Farage and of Reform is to say, in order to level the playing field, what we have to do is clamp down on other people's speech, go to the police, turn this into an incitement issue, and as a consequence, we end up with less free speech than we did before. And I have every sympathy. But Farage is absolutely right in his article to say if he'd posted this, there would have been a different reaction. Mm. But just because of that doesn't mean that it would be the right thing to do to say that somebody who's wearing an absolutely vile, intemperate T-shirt that's then retweeted. I mean, it wasn't originating from Zach Polanski, that should become a matter of criminal charges, incitement, in which case the jails are just going to be full. Because I think that what we need to do is to hold our nerve in circumstances like this. We can point out the hypocrisy. I remember when Zach Polanski, I think actually on Newsnight as well, welcomed the arrest of Graham Linehan for his tweet or in relation to the trans issue. And so, Zach Polanski is no friend of free speech. No. But Reform should be. I mean, their instinct should not be to clamp down all the time, even if it makes them feel as though that's a fair, level playing field. I think it's a mistake.
Do you think there was some sort of strategy in here to make it a media line, to report it to the police so the media might talk about it in order to highlight this hypocrisy, in order to highlight the fact, actually, that we're not talking enough about the potential threat posed by the radical left when it comes to politicians on the right?
Well, you've got to be careful about your strategy and your tactics, haven't you? Because that way you can get trapped. I mean, you're going to end up being... what's going to happen is that somebody will retweet an inappropriate tweet by somebody else, somebody from Reform, and then all hell will break loose and everybody will say double standards, double standards. So I just think, what I want is a frank and open discussion. I think it's important, of course, that we talk about the way that people have accepted that political violence is appropriate. I obviously, like you, and like everybody, I think, I'm still in shock about what's happened to Anne Widdecombe. I can't get over it, really. I mean, it's horrendous, and the fact that people not only just accepted it, but just kind of normalize it, and some people celebrated it. Yeah. That is absolutely true. I also think that the way that we are dehumanizing and isolating what are described as, beyond the pale politically, and that's reform, in a way that's being done by mainstream parties, it almost makes it kind of open season. And I think that's a dangerous thing to do. I think that the hyperbole and the viciousness of the way that, a populist party, for want of a better expression, is being described, which basically writes off all the millions of people who voted for it as somehow beyond any kind of respectable political discourse. That is a dangerous mood. All I'm saying is we shouldn't ourselves kowtow to that. We have to be very, very careful here, because the one thing that I am absolutely convinced of is that in order to improve things, to change politics for good, which is what I want to happen, is we need more open discussion, more less fetters on what we say. And in fact, if we're going to say that, Anne Widdecombe made a brilliant speech at the Oxford Union making that very point. It's hugely crucial to any radical movement, anyone who wants to change the world, that we do not keep inviting the authorities to arrest people or investigate or clamp down on speech which we find vile, offensive, and sometimes aggressive and aimed at us. And as it happens, Zach Polanski didn't do that. He endorsed it. We should condemn him for his double standards and his hypocrisy, but keep well away from clamping down on speech.
I do find at the moment, sort of watching politics, everything is so puerile. It's like watching school. Zach Polanski being asked by Victoria Derby yesterday, are you going to apologise? Well, I didn't mean to do it, so I don't see what I should. But are you going to apologise? It was like a kid trying to get out of detention. And I feel like this is where we've got to now with the state of politics in the United Kingdom. And it's interesting talking about, Andy Burnham has said a lot about, well, we need to be more conciliatory. We need to work together. We need to, come together on the big issues across the political divide. And that's what he said about the adult social care. Of course, he started that speech praising Sir Ed Davey for being a carer himself and talking about it on the radio. And then he said, let's all get together and discuss this issue. Everybody. But Reform UK. And it's the same thing going on in that by-election in Clacton. And it just seems a little bit pathetic. It seems like I'm watching the film Mean Girls.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a much more serious issue, in my opinion. I think that what's happening, and actually you can see this happening across Europe in different countries, it's almost as though a kind of decisions being taken that the way that we deal with the rise of parties that are not mainstream is to isolate them, socially and culturally isolate them, so that you don't have to engage with them. And it's called, actually, in the EU, they have a name for it, which is cordon sanitaire. You kind of basically say, do not talk to or have any involvement with those people. Now, as it happens, I was a bit more sympathetic to Andy Burnham's speech on social care than you and Benedict were. I mean, I think what he's very good at is describing, really genuinely getting to the heart of describing some of the problems we face in society. And that's a refreshing change after we've had to listen to Starmer drone on in that way that kind of we all wanted to scream and were screaming when he was talking. Burnham is much better at getting to the nub of the problem. Solving it, whole different ballgame, right? I mean, I'm not in any way suggesting that he's going to know how to deal with it, but at least he describes it in ways that are human and that I actually related to a lot of what he said. I think it's absolutely disgraceful that he then said, this is a national problem that needs to be solved by the serious politicians in the room, and we all need to get together, and then excludes reform. I mean, that is genuinely, it's a stupid word to use, but you've just said about children. It's a bit like bullying, right?
It is, yeah, it's like playground bullying,
we will involve everybody who's serious, but not those dirty, nasty reform types over there. And I worry about that, because it's become clear that the only way that they feel confident about defeating not just Reform, but any challenger party is to try and discredit them in such a way that then they are isolated and not taken seriously. And I think that that's demoralizing. I think that, you know, if you're a local Reform councillor or an activist and you're basically, you know, given the kind of centre Coventry treatment, to use that phrase, or treated like a pariah, somebody who is just despicable and beyond engaging with, that can make you think, God, why would I get involved in politics? And then when they use abuse against you, which you fear might lead to some kind of even physical attack, you can see the tactic there is to basically make it unpalatable to be involved in any kind of insurgent movement. Now that, to me, is the dangerous point.
But it's also, let's be clear on this. For a long time over the past 2 years, Reform were polling almost at 30%, which means 1 in 3 voters, which, frankly, the Prime Minister has just said, you don't matter. Your concerns are of no interest to me. In fact, I'm going to be rude enough to say that you need to be not just ignored, but avoided. And it's interesting because it's parallel with the fact that he has said absolutely nothing about the major issues facing the country today, being legal and illegal migration, 2 topics he wishes to avoid. But at the same time, like I said, I think we need to start having a conversation about the radical left, because in the wake of what happened to Anne Widdecombe, there are huge questions that still need to be answered. Very often in the Be Kind movement, you see the rhetoric of be kind or else, you know, the veiled threats, the demonisation, the stochastic terrorism, where you create an environment in which you make somebody come across as such an existential crisis, it can prompt someone with a screw loose to go and act upon urges to stop that person. I don't like the phrase in politics, stop Reform, because I think, you know, it sounds a bit like, go on, do what's necessary. And at the same time, we have an emergence of extreme leftist politics. This is an example of that. So you have a mayor, a Green Party councillor, Hao Tam, who's cabinet member for Sanctuary and Healing at Lewisham Council. Yes, a very important portfolio, that. But she has been sharing a map on her social media account showing the precise location of police vans. She's basically been telling people how to avoid police CCTV or facial recognition. The surveillance van, which is deployed in Deptford, she is basically doxing out its location. This, to me, has echoes of the anti-ICE protests in America, which were connected to some pretty militant organisations, such as Antifa. And we're using a sort of military-level OPSEC hygiene to actually go and start trying to drive cars into deportation officers. And I think this is a very serious subject that we need to grab by the nettle.
So Right, 2 different things. The first part of what you said, I absolutely agree with. I mean, despite the fact that, you know, my origins are on the left, the leftist discourse that, for example, has done this unholy alliance with Islamism, the kind of arguments, or not arguments, the rhetoric that's coming out of a lot of the Green Party, as it happens, but not just the Green Party, parts of the Labour Party as well, which seeks to dehumanise and viciously talk about anybody from, you know, Reform or that they consider to be the enemy of the of their kind of brand of politics, is the opposite of Be Kind, and it's dangerous. And I agree that we need to tackle that, talk about it. We can't let them get away with that in ways that you describe. Right. Now, wait for it. I, however, hate the use of live facial technology by the state, and I think it's rather dangerous. And if you talk to people like Alan Miller from Together, or you talk to Big Brother Watch, they are also concerned about this from a civil liberties point of view, and I think they've got a point. So for once, I hate to say it, that Green councillor, despite all of my nervousness, and by the way, things that are happening in Green councils at the moment, which are openly anti-Semitic. I mean, they just voted against twinning with Haifa, a liberal Israeli town, city, last night in Hackney. And there was vicious scenes outside the council building, which, by the way, also had this ridiculous situation of trans activists and pro-Palestinian activists all on the same steps, supposedly on the same side, but not really. I mean, God knows. In which, by the way, a Jewish woman was attacked, apparently, in her being there. So, you know, there's some vicious things going on. But despite all of that, I want us to be able to say that what that Green councillor said about live facial technology, recognition technology has a point. I don't want to be so sectarian that I throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm not sure it's quite the same as ICE. I think what was closer to that was the reaction that Plansky gave to those police officers who went in and fought in the face of danger when there'd been a stabbing of Jewish people, and he condemned them. I think that's definitely undercurrent. But some of this technology is actually dangerous. And I mean, you know, I've been saying to people, Euston have got live facial technology signs everywhere. Go in the other entrance. So maybe you'll condemn me as well. I don't think it's quite the same. I think that we have to, therefore, as I say, hold our nerve, have some principles, say what it is that we disagree with, not just because the people saying it are people we disagree with.
Totally agree. Claire, thank you ever so much. Always a delight to have your wisdom, your common sense on this programme. Let's do a couple of messages now before we go to break. Johnny from Carlisle says, please make it stop. Well, he hasn't. He's still going. This man is breaking my will to live already. Alex, just going to the shop to buy some sick bags after listening to our PM, says Chris in Chester. My God, someone hand him a script. Waffle, says Rob in Portsmouth. Listening to Burnham reminds me of one of those sleazy car salesmen who stand there saying, yeah, we'll put a year's road tax on for you, we'll put a year's MOT on, we'll put some foot mats in, blah, blah, without telling you that it's all being put on the final bill. Quite. Jane says, morning, guys. Just listening to Saka and Andy. He's talking like a local councillor to that small audience. He's saying nothing. Give me strength. Anyone who falls for this BS is stupid. Listening to Andy Burnham on NHS and social care. We'll sort illegal immigration out and overseas aid. That will raise billions for these sectors, says Jill in Newcastle, a point that I was also making. Another invited audience, a speech sending viewers and listeners to sleep, and he still hasn't said what he's there for. And frankly, he's still chuntering away. Lord knows what he's saying. We'll get the details at some point. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what changes in viewing habits and what it might mean for the BBC. That's after this.
The borders have been opened to Islamist extremists. They are radicalising individuals in broad daylight, nurturing anti-Semitism, and they've been caught red-handed on multiple occasions, yet the government is refusing to act. That's across Europe, by the way. It's not just in France. It's not just in Germany. It's here. It's happening here in the United Kingdom. It's happening on our soil.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Now, we all know that the sort of way we watch television, the stuff that's on television, has totally changed. We still have to pay the licence fee, but many of us aren't necessarily watching the BBC anymore. Well, a new survey by Ofcom suggests that TV viewers are now as likely to turn to Netflix as they are the BBC. Netflix is now the first choice for 26% of viewers. The BBC's at 25%. YouTube is up there among people aged 75 and over. However, apparently viewing rose from 28% to 33% last year. Those silver surfers, they finally discovered the world of YouTube. And in good news, for us at least, aside from screens, 93% of adults listen to some form of audio content. 87% listen to live radio every week, giving it the longest reach of any media sector. Long live the radio. Let's speak now to Robin Aitken, who's a former BBC journalist and the author of Can We Trust the BBC? I mean, Robin, the writing is essentially on the wall for the BBC, isn't it? They're talking about, I don't know, possibly putting a BBC iPlayer behind a paywall. But I never hear, when you look at this and look at the fact that the BBC no longer monopolises the market, but the licence fee keeps going up and up, what I never hear from the BBC is actually offloading and getting rid of stuff.
No, you're quite right. Good morning to you, Alex. Yeah, I mean, this is, there must be quite a lot of worried people in the upper echelons of the BBC, because actually I think things are approaching crisis point at the corporation. Because these latest figures that you mentioned, the Ofcom figures, they don't quite tell the whole story, obviously, because those people who log on and watch Netflix as their go-to channel, I mean, these people are probably not that interested in news and current affairs, I would guess, because you're not going to get that on Netflix, right? So you're looking at two different audiences. But the problem for the BBC is that the way the market has fragmented and the way more and more people are migrating away from the corporation means that it's becoming something that everyone has to pay for, but not everyone watches. And the more that happens, the more there will be a sense of alienation from the BBC by those people who don't want it. Nobody wants to be forced to pay for something they don't want. And that's the problem. And more people are leaving the BBC altogether and not paying their licence fees. That, in a nutshell, is the whole problem.
It raises questions about what the licence fee is supposed to be for, because we're told it's for public service broadcasting. And yet every time the BBC are forced to make some sort of cuts, they do things such as cutting UK rolling news. We now have this merger between what was the BBC News Channel and BBC World. And I find it quite deplorable that a certain time of night, if I wanted to watch BBC News, is being presented by a foreign man in studios in Washington, which seems absolutely ridiculous considering the first B is supposed to stand for British. And yet they will keep pouring hideous amounts of money into, have-been celebs who want to make podcasts on iPlayer and, big ticket entertainment, when, as we can see, people who want that stuff are going to independent platforms such as Netflix. Perhaps we should turn around to the BBC and say, look, if you're going to get the licence fee, focus on news, focus on information, focus on current affairs, because that is the public service that you're supposed to provide.
Well, yeah, I would agree with you, but then I'm a big consumer of news and current affairs, and let's be honest, a lot of people aren't. Alex, I mean, you've got to acknowledge the fact there's an awful lot of people who simply aren't interested in politics, and the last thing they want to do is turn on the television and watch a lot of politicians talking about current affairs. I mean, that is the reality of the situation. The point about the BBC is this, that the BBC has always argued in terms of its universality. What does that mean? It means that because everyone has to pay for it, it has to provide something for everyone. That's why it has Radio 1 for those people who like pop music, it has Radio 3 for those people who like classical music, etc., 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 on through all the channels. And the point is that actually we're arriving at a point where
basically, look, I'm sorry to interject. We're running out of time. It needs to be streamlined, I think, is what we can agree on. We've got to take a break now, but don't go anywhere, because we'll find out what Burnham's saying afterwards.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There we go, the music's back. It's time to wake ourselves up again after 1 hour of Burnham saying, well, absolutely nothing. It appears, I just said to Ted, the producer, and I said to Benedict, my gosh, Benedict, rub your eyes, son. You look like
that did for me. That really did for me. Yeah,
I struggled, I must admit. I struggled. But we sort of figured, well, what did he say in that hour?
There was noise.
I don't know.
That was it.
We don't know. Like, he didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Apparently, he says that the social care failures are a major dereliction of public duty. And that's it. Do we know how it's going to be funded? No. Do we know what it's going to look like? No, because, of course, Baroness Casey is doing a review into the sector. So then after that, we will find out. So quite what he was waffling on about for an hour, I'm not really sure. Welsh Rob says, thanks for cutting the Burnham waffle. I was waiting for the flip chart to appear. Don't listen to it when you go to bed, though, Alex. It'll give you nightmares. I find it quite somnifacient. I think that'd be quite helpful tonight instead of fireplace noises and the shipping forecast. My favourite message, though, has come in privately.
Oh.
I know. It didn't come to 87222.
Oh, dear.
No, it came to Alex Phillips' own personal mobile phone from Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. I can hear him right now at home going, ha-ha, laughing because he knows what he wrote. Here we go. He says, Christ, could Burnham be more boring if he tried? Tedious little brain-dead socialist who thinks we all want the government to be our mother. At least when Russia annihilates us, we'll have a ludicrously expensive social care system firing on all cylinders.
Tell us how you really feel, Kev.
Yeah, I love it. But, you know...
At least he stayed awake for the majority of Burnham's. I'm not going to lie, the two of us are properly kind of like, wow.
I've actually got eye issues now.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to do the rest of the show with just like a sort of gentle resting face with my eyes closed.
It's fine. There are going to be other stories, right? There are going to be things to actually liven us up.
Or
is this it? Is this all that
in fact, that is what we're going to do now. We're going to move on to other matters. Because, you know, in a nutshell, Andy Burnham says we need to have a national adult social care service. And that's it.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks,
Done.
Andy.
Gone.
Wonderful.
That's it. All right. Not a bad plan, just not enough of it yet. Not an hour's worth of chat.
You said not a bad plan. Is there a plan? I think it's
no,
more
there
just.
is no plan.
I think it was more just a sentence. It's not a bad sentence.
Well, more than a sentence.
Yes.
About 2,382 sentences
the first
by the looks of things.
was good, and the rest of it could have just been, you know, it could have been a tweet, basically. Not even this meeting could have been an email. This could have been a tweet. That's it.
Actually, that sort of speech was the equivalent of one of those Zoom conversations where you've got Jobsworths who sort of keep speaking because they think that it makes them look good, and you're like, shut up! I just want to get out of this thing.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, we are on Talk Radio, so I'm not saying that that's what I do, but still, I have to fill time sometimes. I have to speak. So yes, let us see. What else can I fill time on? Right,
now we're going to move on to other topics. Today actually marks the 2 years since the horrific, brutal, evil stabbing of children by Axel Ruder-Cabana. We, of course, had an inquiry into the failings that seem to be shared by Germany, for instance, such as sending people on prevent courses and thinking somehow they're going to become non-terrorists. Berlin paying the price for that the other day, of course, when a van ploughed into a Pride march and an Islamist basically said that, well, he did it, didn't he? Not like to point that out, though. It's a bit like we've had a report out today that we are technically one of the most anti-Semitic countries in the world. In fact, the UK recorded the biggest rise in anti-Semitic incidents last year of any country with a major Jewish population. And I'm reading this report, and I'm thinking about Berlin, and I'm thinking about what happened in Paris the other day. And it's interesting that you're just not even allowed to mention the fact that what connects all of these things together, the rise of anti-Semitism, Axel Ruder-Cabana, what happened in Berlin, what happened in Paris, is Islamism. It's terrorism. And we seem now to have got to the point that, well, we better not mention that, which seems incredibly dangerous. Well, we are going to mention it because we're joined now by former senior police officer and ex-head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips. Chris, I remember back in the day, 2002, and after the 7/7 bombings, where we got regular updates on the terror threat level. It was a bit like a traffic light system. And you'd see the presence of more police in big train stations and tube stations and things like that. It now seems that at a time when we know that the IRGC have shipped a load of their cells, their operatives, into the UK via illegal routes, when we're seeing attacks on synagogues, where we're seeing, again, things like what happened in Southport, that we're trying to brush under the carpet that Islamist terrorism is probably still one of the most predominant dangers in our society. Where do you think the terror threat level is today compared to, say, a couple of decades ago?
Well, the terrorism threat level, Alex, is at severe. Now, severe means a terrorist attack could happen at any time, and it's very likely to happen at any time, to be quite frank. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If you import huge numbers of people who are brought up to hate Jews, that there's a rise in anti-Semitism in the country that they go to. And, you know, I was talking to a guy the other day, just in, you know, he was Bangladeshi, and his hatred for Jews and the blaming them for every part of the ills of all society was just incredible. And we've imported huge numbers of people, so we shouldn't be surprised that we've got this rise.
And yet it seems to me that no one's allowed to connect this with the word Islam. I mean, even you've avoided saying the word Islam there, and it's clearly the common denominator. And, you know, what is becoming apparent to me the other day when Shabana Mahmood made a big song and dance about the threat to the Islamic community. They had an emergency security meeting, you know, community leaders from that faith, to discuss how endangered they are. And there was this supposed far-right terror plot where the police had to go bust them apart, and then absolutely no charges were brought against this supposed far-right organisation, this group of people. And the general public, the mask has slipped now. The jig is up. We can see what's going on. And yet no one seems to actually want to tackle this. How dangerous is that? The fact that we're not having a national conversation, that essentially a lot of this toxic ideology is being spread within communities, within mosques in this country.
Well, the conversation is going on. Let's be quite honest, Alex. The conversation about the problems that are happening in this country are going on, and the cause of it. It's just not being carried out. The will is not being carried out by those who have power. And that is quite incredible. And it's seen effectively the demise of the Conservative Party previously, and now Labour are harking at. And then you've got the Greens, who just have incredible policies. And the naivety of these people is just ridiculous. The simple fact is 75% of the threats of terrorism in the UK comes from extreme Islam. That's said by MI5, it's right out there. And yet, as you say, as soon as an attack takes place, it's very important, it seems, from politicians to try and spread the blame wider than the evil people that are actually committing it.
Are they essentially, and when I say they, I mean the establishment, are they gaslighting us when they're talking to us, saying, well, you know, actually Muslims are the ones receiving all the abuse and hatred, the threat level against them is intense, they've had to convene an urgent security meeting?
Well, for some reason they don't want to talk about it, and let's be quite honest. I think they kind of realise that there's very little they can do. They've allowed the problem to grow and to formulate. In the UK, we now have a huge number of people, 40-odd thousand, 45,000 plus, that are on the terrorism watch list. Then we've got people from the extreme end who aren't even on that watch list. And then, as we heard earlier, we've got 500 to 1,000 people coming in some days, all of whom we have no idea who they are. So the level of the problem is so great that I think the politicians are scared to talk about it.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's endangering all of us. Now, I want to talk to you about another form of terrorism. I mean, you will fully understand as a former police officer that now there have been charges brought against the man allegedly responsible for murdering Anne Widdecombe. We can't talk about that specific case, but I will use it as a starting point because, you know, what we were told was a burglary gone wrong, evidently it was not, then got picked up and is being investigated by counter counter-terror police. The suspect was rearrested under terror charges. Surprisingly, we're going to be waiting a long time for that trial. I think it's about a year, which seems strange.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, why? Why is it? Why are we waiting that? What you would think, you know, a very famous politician being murdered in her own home and counter-terror police taking over this, you'd think that they would rush that to court quite quickly.
Caught on camera as well. I mean, it's not as though it appears that there's...
what's going on there? Why?
I don't know. I know for sure it takes a long time to properly look at the computers of those people that are engaged. Maybe there's links to other people. I don't know. We can only surmise. But all court cases now are taking far too long to get to court. We need to speed this process up. Courts need to be sitting late into the evening. Now, what happened to night courts? I think that was often muted. We need to get people through the criminal justice system quicker because, I mean, this is one case. This is an awful case and the worst case. But you imagine if you suffer a rape or a sexual assault, having to wait 2 or 3 years actually to get before the court.
But this is my concern because, you know, you talk about there, you know, having to go through computers and see perhaps if there are other people connected to this man. And that's the main subject I want to talk to you about, the concept of hard left terrorism. And I'm just concerned that the delays on this reaching trial could be political. And that the whole time that we are waiting for that trial, are we doing the hard yards of looking into potential hard left terrorism? Because, you know, we've had a Green Party activist with that very tasteless T-shirt showing a guillotine and saying making plans for Nigel. We've discovered that there's an organisation called Bashback, extreme trans activists who, you know, talk about using hammers to force people into submission to their will. We've seen hammers being used by the now proscribed organisation Palestine Action. And I've been saying for a while now, I think that one of the greatest threats to this country is coming from the hard left. They are violent. They're deeply unpleasant. If anyone's ever encountered them, like I have, you would know that these people are not be kind at all. They're actually pretty appalling. And yet we keep being told, well, it's the far right. It's the far right. What about the far left, Chris?
Well, I mean, there's always been a major issue with anarchists, and other single-issue groups that have pretty much all come from the left. And they are some of the most violent people I've ever come across. And yes, they are a major issue. Whether when it becomes terrorism is another matter. That you know, that has to go through the process, I suppose, of motives and things. But for sure, the hard left is extreme and has committed huge numbers of offences over the years.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think we do need to start using the word terrorism when it comes to these people, because they terrify me. They terrify a lot of people on the right wing who have encountered them, who are now scrambling to get security on their homes, making sure their address isn't available online. If ever you've walked anywhere close as a right-winger to some sort of Socialist Workers' Party gathering, the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. You were genuinely worried for your safety. And I think increasingly now people on the right wing are worried that they might lose their jobs, be ostracised, face you know, a verbal retribution on the street, and potentially now, if you are someone with a public profile, be physically attacked. So at what point, when we talk about terrorism and actions being taken that effectively make people have to rethink the way they live their lives, are we not going to apply that word to the hard left?
Well, I mean, let's be quite clear. The word terrorism has strict legal definition, and but you know, part of that could easily come within what they're doing. I think there's always been a desire over the years for things like single issue groups, whether it's animal activists or others, not to be labelled as terrorists because such a large number of people actually hold the same views and they don't want to turn big portions of society into terrorists. However, what we've seen over the last few years is a rise in that level of violence, and as you say, aimed at people who just hold different views, and we do have to clamp down on people's behaviour. And what I see as well is with the Green Party linking up with Islamic groups. It's just that is the most crazy thing I've ever seen in my life. It just doesn't make any form of sense, other than people that just want to overthrow a government.
I mean, I think we need to define this issue, because I think in defining the issue, acknowledging hard left terrorism exists, then we can actually start looking into things such as foreign funding, because I'm utterly convinced, much like we know that those hate marches, the pro-Palestine marches, have largely been corralled by Islamist organisations and hostile states. I would be very confident in suggesting that many of these hard left organisations possibly receive foreign funding. Is it something, when you were the head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, that was ever being looked at?
Oh yes, very much being looked at. The issue is now we have got the Iranians and the Russians funding all sorts of groups, bringing their own people in as well. And of course, the idea is to foment dissent in a society, and they will go to the groups that they think are most likely to be able to do that. So there is absolutely no doubt that the Russians are working very closely. And of course, the internet, the dark web, and other units within the internet, they can communicate very quickly, transfer funds, cryptocurrencies and things, which really make the work of policing it very difficult.
Chris, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Chris Phillips, former senior police officer, ex-head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. It's funny, isn't it, when we're talking about, oh, the dangers of the hard left, the hard right, the far right, the extreme right. We've heard this for ages and ages, and you know, where have been the hard right terror attacks? I've not seen them. Where are the brown shirts and the skinheads? Not really seen many. And yet we have repeatedly now these increasingly unpleasant gatherings of the hard left with threatening behaviour, carrying placards and slogans that say revolting things. We potentially have somebody who's been murdered as a result. We don't know for sure yet. But I am deeply concerned that we are, once upon a time last year, we fought, not last century, we fought communism. We seem to have imported some of the worst elements of extreme left-wingery. It's dreadfully disruptive to society, incredibly divisive. And on the right, if we even dare suggest that this goes on, well, we're not allowed to.
Yeah,
we're not allowed to point it out.
A lot of this, of course, downstream of the sort of militant stuff that we see in the United States. But what we don't actually have in the UK is the sort of the counterbalance to militant leftism that you get in the United States, which is fundamentally the right to bear arms and organisation of, you know, right-leaning militias. So when you talk about, you know, domestic terrorism in the United States, there's a lot of it more broadly because it's a far more violent culture. We exist downstream of a lot of stuff that comes from the United States, and in our sort of political discourse, you have one truth, and that is that Britain's modern foundational state exists because it fought the Nazis, and that Nazism is the worst possible thing, and therefore you can sort of claim that everything that sort of touches on right-wing politics can be in some ways linked to Nazism, and Nazism is, as you know, bad. So you're able to import the nastiest elements of left-wing sort of activism, and it's accepted and it's justified because it's in opposition to Nazism or fascism, whatever it might be. It's a good thing that we don't actually have, you know, the counterweight to that, because you don't want armed right-wing groups necessarily running around Britain either. But what you therefore have is a sort of a tacit acceptance of increasingly violent left-wing activism. Now, you know, we need to remember there has been a far-right assassination of a politician in this country in the last decade of Joe Cox, but it was very much a sort of an out-of-the-blue kind of situation with a particularly deranged individual. It was not, in fact, the start of an insurgent decade of right-wing terrorism. It wasn't like in Italy when you had the years of lead, where you had lots and lots of sort of organised terrorism on both sides. That needs to be borne in mind here. One individual, one isolated incident there led to an appalling outcome. But what we've seen, for instance, with Islamism is you had one in terms of 7/7 and then an ongoing sort of slew.
And what we're starting to see emerge, I would argue, on the left is a similar thing, what I call the rainbow assassins, especially in America.
If what we had in this country was a far-right threat in the same way that we have an Islamist threat, you would have seen more of these sort of lone wolf attacks getting through, because by nature it's to do with volume.
But
if you have enough of them, they get through. And we've turned a blind eye to left-wing activism and left-wing violence, because everything is set up in this country in opposition to fascism. And if you put yourself as an opponent to fascism, you are sort of given a little bit more leeway to get away with things. That is why we turn a blind eye.
That's the disguise that they use.
Yeah,
but
that's why we turn a blind eye.
Are we not essentially now enabling the importation of what's been going on in America? People trying to assassinate Donald Trump. I've been thinking Thomas Crooks, the guy who has been allegedly held responsible. We don't know yet. I think it's Tyler something who killed Charlie Kirk. We are beginning to see now, and you see them, their sort of mad short blue hair and their nose rings.
Was it Minnesota where a couple of local politicians were also assassinated? A couple of Republican local politicians were.
No, I didn't know that.
No, they've been. These are the two high-profile ones. There are quite a few.
Are we now seeing, because we're not doing anything about it, talking about it, labelling it, acknowledging it, pretending it doesn't exist? Are we now going to be enabling radical left-wingers from going out and perpetrating acts of violence?
This is the problem. I think because our state is so obsessed with control, it will react if we see that sort of uptick in violence. But it'll react by cudgeling everybody.
Yeah.
And that's when you get, say, the crackdowns on free speech. It's always the response. Political violence in this country leads to politicians saying, you know what the problem is? People on Twitter, people saying what they think. And that'll be the response. There will be an uptick in monitoring of left-wing groups. Absolutely there will. But it won't be that the politicians look at this and go, they are the specific danger. They'll use it as an opportunity to take lots of people's liberties.
And everyone else. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're joined by Maxwell Marlowe, who's the Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. We're going to be talking numbers. We're going to be asking about Burnhamomics. That's after this.
To be our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago, he wasn't even an MP. The next, he's holding keys to number 10.
You know what? I'm trying so hard not to be cynical about it all, but I'm trying to keep, not hope. I'm sick of hearing about hope already. He's only been in government for 5 minutes, but I want them to succeed because I want Britain to succeed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back. I was just trying to quickly finish a biscuit then as the countdown was going on. I think I've got bits of oat between my teeth.
It's a really woke biscuit. You need to reveal that.
That's what I said. That's what I said to Jeremy Carr when he offered them to me. He said, do you want one of my oat things? And that's a bit woke, isn't it?
Oat biscuits is wrong. I'm sorry.
They're quite nice, actually. I'm not going to lie.
All right, relatively.
Although they do leave bits.
You need chocolate hobnobs. That's what you need.
Right, anyway, on that note, let us talk about, well, economics. Burnhamomics. I can't say it.
With oat biscuits in your teeth, that's going to be
Burnham. You just want to say Burnhamomics, not Burnhamomics.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Much like the policies, the word itself doesn't really work.
Much like 18 to 25-year-olds, who apparently also don't work, so much so that Andy Burnham is going to bribe their parents by giving them £4,500 to encourage their children to start an apprenticeship. Make that make sense? Well, let's ask Maxwell Marlowe about it, because it seems to me this idea of, well, you know, you're getting all these benefits because your kid's at home. How about we replace those benefits with money so they go out and work? And you think, well, if the kid's available or able to go out and do an apprenticeship, why were they receiving any sort of benefits? I don't understand this. I cannot wrap my head around the concept of saying your child going out and doing an apprenticeship instead of being on disability benefits means you need to be paid something for that.
Actually, sorry, Alex, sorry. I'm usually on with Julia. I do apologise.
That's all right.
Just slipped into it. It's not Burnhamonic's, it's economics north, really, on this. So, but I do think on this particular plan, though, it is the creation of a bunch of quangos and charities pushing against what they like to call the benefits trap, which is clearly absurd, right? Because what the argument is that if a single parent household loses a disabled child to go into work, which is how they see it, they should all not really be working from their perspective, the household will be £80 worse off a week. And how is it that these charities want to fix it? Oh, another bung, fantastic, layering more payments on top of a very complicated benefit system as it is already. So we've already seen Helen Whately, the shadow welfare secretary, and Ian Duncan Smith, who basically charged through the creation of universal credit, both saying this is a terrible idea. We need to cut down on the size of the benefit payments rather than just handing out even more, because we don't have the bravery to turn around to people and say, actually, you shouldn't be taking as much money off hard-working taxpayers as you thought.
But what the bit I'm really struggling with is how these young people were getting money in the first place. If they're capable of going and doing an apprenticeship, they're capable of going out and working, which is why, therefore, do they need a living allowance? What is that money for?
Well, this is part of the kind of PIP regime. It's part of child benefit as well, which can be uprated if the child has a disability. But as you and I both know, Alex, it's completely absurd, because a lot of these diagnoses are for ADHD, for anxiety, for things like that. I mean, there are some serious cases as well. Don't get me wrong, and it's more likely if you're more seriously disabled, you are less likely to go into work. And I don't want to force these people to work, and I think they should receive some support. But for a lot of kids who are, they're not taking advantage of the system, but they may not really be needing that money, this is where this money will be wasted. And it's more waste from a government which doesn't want to cut down on waste. So it's completely absurd. I'd be surprised if this works at all, fundamentally. And let's not forget, this is unfunded. The government have said that this money is going to be rerouted from another pot of money that itself was rerouted. So it's a complete fiscal mess. And I'd be surprised if this gets through Parliament. I
mean, there's going to have to be a whole lot of rerouting. Is that what we're going with? I'd go with rerouting, but I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of it, because one thing that Andy Burnham seems to like doing is constantly drip feeding all these brand new shiny policies that he wants to see in Britain, from loads of devolution to taking over all the utilities and renationalising them. Now we've got adult social care. I mean, great. Wouldn't it be lovely if we had, a fully functioning adult social care system, estimated to potentially cost as much as $18 billion a year? We just listened to him drivel on for an hour in old people's home. I'm amazed the residents managed to stay awake. And out of all of it, we just don't know where the money's coming from on any of this stuff. Where should it come from? When Andy Burnham sits down with John Healey over the summer, gets out the old Diane abacus and starts trying to tot up the maths and tries to stick with the Labour Party manifesto of saying we will not be increasing taxes on working people, then where should he be getting the cash from? Where have we got excess that we could cut down?
Oh, all over the place, really. I mean, the amount of waste we find in procurement, we should get rid of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport altogether. That should just go. I don't know why government needs to get involved in that particular area, especially when it's busy funding all of these, woke grants and scholarships for PhDs into, whatever the Guardian's fantasy is, really. So we can cut lots of waste, benefits as well. That needs significant cutting. But I will say the plan that's been put forward for social care, I don't quite agree that we should raise this 1.8% tax on people over the age of 35. However, what is encouraging is that if that were to happen, which I don't want it to, but that money would go into a privately managed pension fund. unlike what we see with the government, which is all unfunded, badly managed. It's the sort of stuff that we rely on in the private sector, when we kind of grow old and retire. So I did some back of the fag packet maths actually on this, and I found that if you start at 35, you're paying in an extra 1.8%, and that is about 18 billion a year, across that cohort. By the time they need it in 30 years, if it runs by the way, we usually manage large funds like the University Superannuation Scheme, you would have 226 billion pounds available for that cohort alone, against inflation. So that's a really ginormous figure, which could be used to fund a lot of the social care. So there's a bit of private sector instinct here. It's a little bit Thatcherite, actually, if I may say, Alex, and that's probably it's come from a centre-right think tank, Restate. So I'm not completely against the idea, but knowing how our politicians operate, I don't think it's going to go very well.
Maxwell, thank you ever so much, and well done for your back of a fag packet estimates there. It's fascinating, actually, isn't it? Bit of right-wingery from Andy Burnham. Blimmin' heck, they're not going to allow him to get away with that for much longer, are they, Benedict?
Absolutely not. But, he is trying to... Well, you were talking about this earlier, how he was sort of reaching out to Kemi Badenoch to try and sort of ostracise reform from certain things. I mean, this is going to be something that it will be curious to see if he does it, because, of course, he's trying to win back support from reform sort of leaning areas. Ultimately, that is going to involve doing some things that the average sort of shrieking purple-haired Labour backbencher might not like. It might actually require a bit of common sense. Ever so often, that involves a bit of right-wing economics. I know it's really unusual to people on the left, but that is a possibility, that sometimes people on the right might have a point about things.
Well, I do like to keep saying that Andy Burnham certainly has lashes to flutter, so maybe they will work effectively on his backbenchers. Let's take a call now and speak to Carl, who's in Liverpool. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning, Alex.
What's on your mind?
It's just on these the younger generation getting benefits, the £4,500. I would just do it as simple as this. If you haven't got a job and you're 18 and up to the age of 40 and you've been on long-term benefits and you haven't got a job and there's no reason for you to have those benefits, then you're going to go and do 3 years of military service, as national service. You see how quick these people get a job. You see how quick, because once that threat's there, you've got to go. You've got to go through it. We are hemorrhaging money. We can't afford to give people who aren't working thousands a year. I'm working 2 jobs now. I've had to take a second job on to pay my bills, and my wife, while my wife's on maternity leave, and we've got 4 children. It's hard enough as it is. I don't want my taxes paying for people to sit on the backside while I'm busting my guts working 2 jobs 7 days a week. And I spent time in the military, so I know for a fact it'll work. National service, bring it back, and you watch how many people run to the job centre for a job. It'll happen, because people won't want to be told that they've got to go to work. And if you don't give them any choice, then they're going to go and get a job.
No, I agree. They could be scrubbing graffiti off walls and cleaning public toilets, but of course that wouldn't be appropriate for the Be Kind movement, would it? Carl, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's take a short break now, but we're going to be back just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. In the latest chapter of UK madness, and nothing to see here while we become a caliphate, apparently there's been student accommodation created in Dundee, specifically catering to Muslims. It's been branded as segregation. Well, it is, isn't it? The faith-led accommodation provider Ilm Halal Student Halls has opened a facility near both Abertay and Dundee universities. It apparently pledges to provide premium facilities with no shared flat, surprises, no hidden charges, and a supportive community. In a promotional film, halal-only halls are characterised as something we, as Muslims, require in our life to make sure that we connect to our religion and please Allah. I mean, come on, like, if I were to suddenly say, right, that's it, I want some Christian-only university halls where only Christians can be doing Christian things, I don't think it'd be allowed.
I mean, we should actually look into that and see whether or not such things exist, because I'm not aware of any such thing. Maybe they do, but I just think it's one of those things where, you know, that the whole one of the points about going to university is that we're told one of the benefits that it brings is exposure to new people and new ideas, and of course this is the exact opposite of this. This is siloing people, making sure that you'll never interact with people outside of your immediate religion. I can't see what the benefits of that are, but, you know, broadly speaking, we have to remember our university system is not about educating people. It's just a way of raising money. The whole thing is just a bit of a Ponzi scheme. So the fact of the matter is, if they're doing this, it's because there's a market for it, because there's enough people that are asking for it. That's really concerning. And it shows, I think, the hollowing out of higher education in this country, that it's no longer about becoming enlightened or well-educated. It's about paying for credentials, and you get all the little accoutrements with that if you want them. And that includes segregation, it seems.
I mean, in this, in this particular complex, there's going to be no items such as pork and alcohol.
Or port.
Or port. This comes into the second category. Will be allowed. There's going to be a cinema, a gym, a relaxation space. Everything centred around this most special room where residents can pray. But the marketing materials seem to only show men. Quelle surprise. What troubles me about this is increasingly when you have the creep of these things, oh, well, we've got to have Muslim-only halls of residence, oh, well, we need Muslim summer school, oh, well, we need the Muslim society of, you know, in the civil service, oh, well. These things are always used to deepen multiculturalism, to ghettoise people, but increasingly I often think that they are sort of captured by very unsavoury organisations. In fact, John has sent a message in saying the huge rise of anti-Semitism is specifically part of the Muslim Brotherhood playbook. The Muslim Brotherhood needs to be prescribed in the UK as it is in the majority of Arab Muslim countries. And this is the thing, the more we allow this stuff, it's a thin end of a wedge, and we're going to end up, essentially, with a society where this is the Muslim area, and it's a no-go zone for everyone else, and this is this is the area where the non-Muslims can go.
Yeah, and this is always the problem, though, with, you know, multiculturalism, sort of, you know, in inverted commas, because it's not about, you know, the idea that it was sold as was that everybody lives alongside each other, they all muck in with each other, everybody is tolerant. We all know that's not how it works. It creates a race to the bottom of special interest groups based on ethnicity and religion. It's the exact opposite of what it's sold to you as. And we see it happening in real time in this country and across other parts of Europe. And yet still the insistence is, a bit like socialism, oh, if we just have a little bit more of it, we just double down enough of it, eventually we'll reach the wonderful utopia that we're all reaching for. But it's not true. We all know that it's not true. And as, you know, it comes back, doesn't it, to when, you know, we're talking about sort of the rise in anti-Semitism, then when there was some sort of suggestion that what we need is a special Jewish police force set up specifically to look after Jewish people. And the first thing off the bat is you're thinking, no, because the second you get that, then you'll get Muslim police forces, then you'll get Hindu, and you'll get all of the other ones, and you get the opposite of what you want. You don't get equal fair favour policing, you get special interest groups that are then empowered by the state to take certain, actions against individuals who will behave in a racist or sectarian way in order to enforce rules on other people and to protect their own organisation. This is effectively how you get things like the mafia, when you allow people to sort of silo themselves and sort of set their own
it's
rules.
these organisations that very quickly get penetrated by, some pretty unsavoury, often terrorism-linked organisations like the Muslim Brotherhood. Should we do some calls now?
Yeah,
let's do some calls. Here's Herbie in Harrow. How are you doing, my darling? It's been a while.
Very well, thank you, Alex. Well, Alex, the care in the community, where's the 2% we've been paying for the last God knows how many years in our council tax? What's happened to that money and where's it been spent? Because it's been accumulating over the years.
Oh, is this like a 2% that was supposed to be ring-fenced to pay for social care?
Yes.
Very interesting. I'd imagine it instead is plugging the holes of the massive level of debts that we have in local councils, all of whom, frankly, need to be doged. All of them need to be audited. I actually think if we were to pay proper attention to local councils, audit them, look into some of their contracts, you would probably find ludicrous levels of fraud.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, they keep on saying we're already paying for it. As I said, everybody's been paying 2% for the last 4 or 5 years. Where has the money gone? Surely there hasn't been that much care in every county or borough, or whatever, that needs that amount of money. So where has it gone? Has it been poured or has it been used elsewhere? We need to know this, Alex. Why do we keep on paying out for something we're already paying out for?
It's a very good question. I'm afraid I don't have the answers because, as you just pointed out, the information has not been given to us. Herbie, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak now to Tracy, who's in Burton-on-Trent. Hi, Tracy.
Hello, Alex.
Hello.
I'm going to have to disagree with you and Benedict, I'm afraid.
How dare you phone in and disagree with us?
Listening to Mr. B
go on.
the radio.
Go on.
Alex, he comes across beautifully as a caring, deeply loving person. However, how does he know how much it's going to cost if Baroness Casey hasn't put her report in and it won't be till next year? 2, free products, have an infinite demand. So that if it is 18 billion, it's not going to stay 18 billion for very long. And my final point is the 1.8% tax, that's going to be ring-fenced and it's going to be managed privately. Who gets the contract? Which buddy of Mr. B gets the contract?
Well, there you go. It's a very important questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the answers for any of them because an hour-long speech... Yes, he did come across as a human. Quite surprising after we've had an automaton in number 10 for the past 2 years. And unscripted, no auto-cue. I mean, it's an authentic approach. And there are many merits to be said. But kindness and approachability and niceness and looking like a normal person is not necessarily going to fix the crises our country is in. And I think of, back to the time of Churchill, for instance, who was a great orator. We'll fight them on the beaches. But he actually did stuff. He had plans, he had programmes, he actually had a real-world impact. The big question is all the niceness and kindness and cuddliness and humanity of Andy Burnham going to deliver? Well, he's only just got into office. The jury is still out on that one. Tracy, thank you ever so much for your call. OK, let's take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be looking at matters stateside as Iran launches missiles at US military bases in the Middle East. All of them were intercepted. And Donald Trump has been hosting Netanyahu and Zelensky in the White House. How did those meetings go? We'll speak to Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas, just after this.
So the full list of candidates for the Clacton by-election: Joseph 77, the Independent; Adam Akatip, the Forward Party; Count Binface, the Count Binface Party; Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Tony Kane's an independent. Woke Trump Kazi is an independent. William Stewart James Clouston is the Social Democratic Party candidate. Rhys Cowan, an independent. Glenn Charles Cummings, an independent. Martin Davis, the Freedom Alliance Real People, Real Alternative. Andy Earlam's an independent. Nigel Farage, the Reform UK Party. Atiye Fards, an independent. Lawrence Fox for the Reclaim Party. Tony Francis is an independent. Robin Green, an independent. Abby Hookway, an independent. Howling Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Stephen Richard Ingram is an independent, as is Amy Morris. Derek Norbert Morris is an independent. Michael Noel O'Keefe, an independent. Martin O'Brien, an independent. Nick Pellis, an independent. And Ketanar Kumar PPIA is the UK Voice Safer and Stronger UK party. Daniel Pocock's an independent. James Ransley, the Consensus Party candidate. Jerry Smith is an independent. Kai Stevens for the British Democrats. John Stevens for rejoin the EU. Baron von Thunderclap for the official monster raving loony party. Pamela Walford is an independent. Marcus White, Everyone is God party. And Mark Wilkinson for the Independents.
Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago, he wasn't even an MP. The next, he's holding keys to number 10.
You know what? I'm trying so hard not to be cynical about it all, but I'm trying to keep, not hope. I'm sick of hearing about hope already. He's only been in government for 5 minutes, but I want them to succeed because I want Britain to succeed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now over there in, well, it's not Dictionary Corner, I don't know what it is. Benedictionary Corner.
Oh, nice.
Hey, that was quick, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
I thought I was tired today, but apparently the brain still ticks
there,
over.
still going.
Slow revolutions, but it ticks over. Talking about slow, what did you just find online?
Oh, well, talking about Andy Burnham giving that very, talking about a very slow, ponderous sort of speech that he spent an hour or so giving. Quentin Letts, who I believe is at the Mail, he's the parliamentary sketch writer at the Mail, pointed out that Burnham is going very slowly and then wondered out loud on Twitter whether or not he was maybe being distracted by a woman in a short skirt in the front row. To which Samantha Niblett, who is, people may remember, she was the MP, the Labour MP, who was promoting the Summer of Sex, has got very upset about this demonstration of male sexuality. Who would have thought that the Labour MP championing sexuality is not in fact in favour of male sexuality? Odd that. She says he's disgraceful and should have his parliamentary pass removed.
Oh, for goodness sakes, they're so tetchy, aren't they, on the left?
But I think that's a sign of actually how well the speech went. That's probably going to be the big takeaway, is that these two people having a little tiff over the length of skirts.
There you go. Like I said, we don't actually have politics anymore. We've just got playground politics, basically. Now, talking about real politics, geopolitics, in fact, Donald Trump has been hosting some of his mates over in the White House. Benjamin Netanyahu has apparently left the White House after a positive and productive meeting with Trump, and he also had a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, who might be inquiring after whether America is still prepared to write checks to help Ukraine in their fight against Russia. Now, all the while, the backdrop to these conversations is Iran carrying out missile strikes, or attempting to carry out missile strikes against US military bases in the Middle East overnight. They were intercepted. And we've also learnt that Iran has claimed striking 3 ships travelling through the Strait of Hormuz. Let's catch up now with Greg Swenson, because, Greg, look, I remember when Donald Trump first came back as president and he said, I'm going to sort out Russia. That's all going to be done. 24 hours. Watch me go. I'm going to solve this crisis. And then he said as well about Iran, I'm going to blow them back into the Middle Ages. I'm going to sort this out. We're going to get a beautiful deal. Unfortunately, both of them just look like dumpster fires at this stage. Where are we? What is going on? Let's talk, first of all, about his meeting with Netanyahu. Are they still mates?
Yeah, they are still mates. I mean, remember, Churchill and FDR had their spats, and they were great wartime friends and partners. And so, yeah, look, this is underreported, that the fact that Israel is actually doing really well with on the global stage. The lefty media doesn't like to admit that, but they're doing very well with the Arab countries. They're on the verge of the Abraham Accords with the Saudis. The Latin America is pushing these Isaac Accords. You know, the Argentina, Colombia, all the right-leaning countries and governments and parties are tight with Israel, including this president and the Republican Party here. It's only the radical left Democrats that are sort of having their issues with Netanyahu and Israel. And so I think it was a great day yesterday. You know, I mean, granted, the circumstances were unpleasant, given it was the funeral of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. But the fact that you know, both Netanyahu and Zelensky had meetings at the White House, this town is hopping. Tough to get around, given the security issues. But Washington was hopping yesterday, and it has been all weekend.
Now, is Trump going to start delivering on some of his threats? Because he had previously warned Russia and China, don't get involved in Iran. And yet it's been leaked in the UK press that it seems that Russia have been helping Iran, providing intelligence on where US bases in the Middle East are. We also know, of course, that Russia uses Shahed missiles, that Iran is providing a lot of their weapon infrastructure, so much so that Ukraine hit an Iranian boat delivering armaments over to Russia. It seems now that this anti-Western axis, that the sort of merger of these wars is taking place over there. Do you think that's going to prompt Donald Trump to take a bit of a harder line on Putin? And also, is he going to up the ante with Iran now?
Yeah, I think yes on both. You know, look, the axis of evil is quite apparent now. You know, that China and Russia are both, you know, in bed with Iran, but they're doing it quietly. You know, I don't think they want to escalate this thing, and so they're trying to sneak some missiles both ways, you know, into and out of Iran, or drones. But they're not doing it in a belligerent way. You know, they're being quiet about it. I think the president will probably take that up with Putin. You know, I think that in many ways it just shows you who your friends are and who your adversaries are. And obviously, you know, this axis of evil has been around for a while, but it's getting smaller. Look, they used to have Iran, they used to have Venezuela. They'll probably lose Cuba any minute now, and so. You know, I think the world is coming around to the fact that, you know, America is a force for good, and quite frankly, you know, there's a bond now between the president and Zelensky, which I wouldn't have predicted 3 or 4 years ago, but you know, that's pretty apparent. So, you know, plans are great. I think the president is frustrated that he couldn't end the conflict in Russia. He was very clear about the fact that, you know, this never would have happened if he was in power. You know, the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. So, you know, he's frustrated by it, but on the other hand, I think he's coming around, and much, you know, that's probably, you know, in part due to, you know, encouragement by Lindsey Graham before he died, and I think that's sort of working.
Greg, thank you ever so much. The brilliant Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas. Now, I know that you're especially gifted in matters geopolitic. where can Trump go with this? Because it's quite clear that, you know, the idea of negotiating with a terrorist state is for the birds. Iran's not going to sit there, sign a bit of paper.
Yeah.
Even if they did, they ain't going to stick with it. They are liking prodding the bear. They're liking to continually agitate. The minute that things quieten down, it's almost like they're sort of inciting America. Come on, then, have a go again.
Yeah.
And he did promise he was going to bomb them back into oblivion. He's not done it.
I just think he didn't quite understand the nature of the conflict as it was going to be. He didn't fully understand the nature of the country that he was going to war with. I do wonder if he was naive or maybe he was missold something by others. I'll leave others to determine who that may or may not have been. There's not going to be a regime change in Iran without something far more fundamental happening. That could well be boots on the ground. Now, does that mean American or Israeli soldiers? Probably not. I don't think that would necessarily work. There isn't an organized opposition in Iran to take over from the current regime, so it would always be a very dangerous gamble anyway. But the reality is, this war was going to happen at some point anyway, because the two main belligerents, being Israel and Iran, are diametrically opposed to each other's current positions. One has nuclear weapons, even though it denies it. The other one is actively pursuing them, even though, again, they actually do deny this. That wasn't going to change. One was going to attack the other at some point. And the United States could not just sit back when that conflict broke out and just gone, it's nothing to do with us. It also had obligations to other countries in the region, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. It couldn't just sit back. So it was going to be drawn in at some point. It was probably going to have to escalate further than what it currently is right now. There's not going to be a proper negotiation because neither Israel nor Iran is actually changing its long-term stance towards the other. So even if you have a ceasefire, somehow it'll keep breaking down because one side will rush to get into a position to attack the other. It's curious, though, because, of course, everybody knows if Iran gets the bomb, it sets off a chain reaction of other states looking to defend themselves, especially if they feel that the United States is not the best ally. That's why the Saudi nuclear deal, the beginnings of that, is a very interesting development. Saudi Arabia has said pretty explicitly, if Iran gets a bomb, we're going to get a bomb. It's made absolutely, it said we don't want to get a bomb, but if they do, we will as well. Civilian nuclear power is the first step towards getting a bomb. Every country that gets civilian nuclear power at some point pursues some sort of weapons program. That's what it is downstream of. That's what it's for, ultimately. And of all the countries in the world that don't need civilian nuclear power, Saudi Arabia and Iran are the two that don't need civilian nuclear power. They have literally everything else that you could possibly need. But if that happens, Saudi Arabia maybe gets a weapon as well. Then Turkey does, then Egypt does, then probably Azerbaijan does as well. And then you get the next most dangerous part, which is all those other countries in that region who can't afford, don't have the facilities to get nuclear weapons. What do they get instead? They get biological and they get chemical weapons, because that's what you do in that situation. So it is, as I say, it was a nightmare scenario. It was never going to be avoided by just going, diplomacy, 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 because for as long as Iran wants to get a bomb, and it will want to get a bomb for as long as Israel has a bomb, and Israel's not going to get rid of its bomb.
So what,
this was going to be the chain
where
reaction.
should Trump now go with this? Because
he has to accept that there is probably going to need to be some sort of physical invasion. Now, who it is that does that, I don't know. Would it be a disastrous invasion? Probably, because they clearly haven't prepared for it. But that's going to be the long-term thing. The alternative is to continue to try to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities and just hope it never gets over the threshold.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing like Pitchfork Mountain or something, where apparently there's some sort of big nuclear base. Go get it! I love watching the bombs come out.
It's a nightmare situation, but this is what they've backed themselves into. I don't see what the alternative is right now.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone does. Anyway, we're going to be taking a short break. Don't go anywhere. I'm joined by the brilliant, wonderful, my bestie, Samara Gill, just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. We've been having a good old gossip during the advert breaks. My bestie's in the studio. How are you doing, Samara?
Hello, great to be here, Alex.
Oh, it's nice to have you. Right, you've got an exclusive for us, apparently.
I do. You know, I'm sure you've seen this on X going around. It's Khadija Patel, who is the burqa/niqab wearing woman who got the Empowerment Award in the Palaces of Westminster. I mean, nothing says modern Britain more like, you know, our Parliament going and congratulating a woman who is fully covered, not able to show herself, an award for empowerment. I mean, it's quite frankly ridiculous, and it caused a lot of stir online. I think it's still trending. But I thought, no one's reached out to Khadija. No one's actually wanted to hear her opinion. And so I actually tracked her down. We had a nice conversation. And she came on and spoke to me about how she does feel empowered wearing the niqab and that it shouldn't be banned. Let's have a listen. The criticism has been just a couple comments that I got from online. It says, women who wear the niqab are forced to by their families. You can't be a role model for girls if they can't even see your face. How can you coach sport while wearing a niqab? The niqab is the opposite of women's rights. Sarah Pochin of Reform UK has called for a ban of the burqa and I guess in turn the niqab.
I don't think there should be a ban. There should just how people shouldn't be forced to wear it. People shouldn't be forced to not to wear it. It's a personal choice. And like I said, it shouldn't define who you are, what you do. I'm contributing to society, to the British values of my country whilst wearing it. And I don't see why that's a problem for some people.
I mean, the difficulty is, for me, that is a sign of oppression. If the concept is that,
it's confronting, isn't it, just to look at?
It's very confronting.
It is. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a sign of oppression, and it's unfortunate because people like Khadija, and what I kind of got from this interview is that she's actually a woman doing the best in a bad situation. In some ways, I actually kind of empathised with her because she's so within her own mind about this that she does feel like it's empowerment to wear this. She feels like it's her choice. And I questioned her, it's in the full interview, about the fact that there are a lot of women, in Britain even, that are forced to wear this garment and that don't have the choice. And she said that that's simply not true, which I find a little comical because we know that there are instances where it's mostly the man putting it onto the woman to wear it. And what she does, though, is she plays cricket in it, she swims in it, she tries to do different activities, she tries to get girls who would normally be relegated to the kitchen and household activities and, you know, having children to go out there, go outside and do things. But it's an unfortunate situation. I still am totally by what I think is that it should be banned. And unfortunately, you always bring this up, which is a good point, that women will probably actually just now be shut indoors if it is banned, or they might have to leave to a country where that is allowed. And I think that that would do a lot of good for the nation, to be honest, if it's also a national security problem as well.
It's a national security problem.
So there's multiple different ways my mind's going at the moment with this. But speaking to Khadija, she's a lovely woman, but I don't see it as empowerment.
I mean, the difficulty is with the very concept of a niqab, a burqa, and frankly, even the hijab, is that the message is saying that a woman who isn't doing those things is running the risk of being leered at or potentially attacked or sort of sending inappropriate messages to men. So for me, it's not so much about the person wearing the burqa, it's the message being sent to all the rest of us saying, well, you're not wearing it and that is shameful.
Absolutely. And also, a big part of this was she keeps saying, I chose to wear this, I can wear this in the United Kingdom. Well, yes, you can enjoy the freedoms and liberties that the United Kingdom offers you, but in countries like Afghanistan and Iran, you know, just a couple of hours away by plane, there are women getting their left eye shot out because they haven't covered themselves properly, and Afghanistan is trying to enforce a law by only one eye can be shown. through the burqa or the niqab. So it's all fine and dandy for her.
One-eye thing.
Yeah, there is a one-eye thing that Afghanistan, the Taliban, are trying to enforce, where they believe that 2 eyes is too promiscuous and that 1 eye is justified. And yeah, they have actually been shooting women's eyes out about this. So it's fine to say, oh, I live in the United Kingdom, I enjoy the freedoms and liberties. But there are many Islamic countries that use and abuse the power.
Don't import the opposite of that, basically.
Yeah, precisely.
Benedict, I mean, look, I think France has started closing down radical mosques, apparently. Way! France has banned the burqa. Way! I mean, we need to start taking a leaf out of the Book of France, who we think we got it bad here. We think we've got it bad, but France has had ghettoised Muslim communities for a very long time, and they're having to take action.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about multiculturalism ultimately leading to balkanisation, because people come in and they actually exploit the system. They don't think, this is the opportunity to live like somebody else. They go, this is the opportunity, in fact, to double down on the old way of life that was, the way of life back in my home country. And on top of that, if anybody sort of condemns it or tries to get in the way of that, I can accuse them of being a bigot and possibly even get sympathy as a result of that. Ultimately, there are far too many women even in this country, for whom it is also not a choice. We need to remember that. And this is one of the things that they always say, isn't it? Well, if you ban the burqa, then the women won't be allowed out. And you kind of sat there going, it doesn't sound to me like, you're quite addressing the nub of the problem here, which is that there are still women being oppressed in this country, and this very oppressive government is the only way in which their husbands or male relatives will allow them out. You shouldn't be tolerating that in our society. So I don't have a problem with getting rid of clothes that are restrictive of people's liberty, because ultimately what you want to be doing is getting rid of all of those kinds of restrictions and just saying, well, you have to allow this form of oppression, otherwise they'll get oppressed worse. It doesn't actually seem like a great solution to me.
Not at all. Now, let's talk about Zach Polanski, Samara.
Speaking of oppression.
What do you make of, I want your opinion on what you make of the fact that Reform have gone to the police about this. Do you think that was, do you think that's fine, levelling the playing field, or it's the sort of thing they do on the left? Or do you think they're sort of buying into exactly the sort of reaction that they would otherwise condemn?
I think it's the latter, to be honest with you, Alex. I don't think it's a good move politically for them to go to the police and sort of and do this sort of thing, especially considering that they say that they're the party of free speech. They stick up for things like this. A lot of people have obviously brought the Lucy Connolly example into this situation, whereby she was obviously jailed for incitement to violence. She's now a sort of spokesperson for them, yet they are prosecuting Zach Polanski for doing something kind of similar, although obviously context is really important, and the murder of Anne Widdecombe, is something that really should be cited in this, because I know, or at least, we can tell that Farage is absolutely furious with Zach's post and also everything that's been going around him. It is totally unfair that the right does get it much worse than the left, and the left seems to be this moral arbiter, someone who sets the standards for what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and it's been going on like this for so long. So in a way I understand why they would want to go to the police, but I think it's a very radical thing to do. And I also think that when you look at people like Trump, who have been very popular, they've always had the sort of get with me, it's everyone against us. And what this feels like politically is Reform going, no, we're going to lock these people up. And it's sort of a fun police type of thing, which I just can't really get behind. I find it a little dangerous that they're going and trying to lock other political opponents up for social media posts, which is something that they've always kind of condemned themselves. But I know you've got a different perspective on this, Alex.
Well, no, I agree with you. I think this going to the policing, I think it was weird about Rupert Lowe, and I think it's weird about this. I don't like this idea that things that are, very tasteless should end up with, let's go over to the police. But I do think, on the other hand, what we do need to be talking about as a society, and what police should probably be looking into, are hard left organisations.
Yes.
And whether they genuinely do pose a threat to public figures.
I mean, look, I was at a rally a couple of weeks ago in a journalistic capacity, of course, the Together Alliance rally. And, they were openly calling for the death of Nigel Farage. They had different, weird puppet thingies of Trump and Farage where they were beheaded. They have some really weird imagery. There's a lot of that. I also went to the counter-protest of the Tommy Robinson Unite the Kingdom march. The counter-protest protest of that. I caught on camera, which then, went to tens of millions of people because they were enraged about it. The crowd were chanting, "Shoot him in the neck like Charlie Kirk." And they were about 500 metres away from him on the other side of the bridge doing that. And so the left have become a sort of death cult. They are people who celebrate actively the murder of others. They want to see that violence perpetrated. They think that they are some sort of, resistance fighter, some sort of Jacobean type, and it's not the way things should go.
No, I find it quite terrifying. They tried to rough up our Fred, didn't they, the cameraman?
Yeah. Well, that was a gang member near Marble Arch. It's getting worse and worse and worse, people. But yeah, we went down to Marble Arch, and yeah, Freddie, who's the cameraman, got basically physically assaulted by one of these people, and they're the same homeless people that Andy Burnham would like to basically legalise their homelessness and give them a bunch of money. So, yeah, it is a dire state, and I agree with you. It's just the right cop it so much worse. So much worse.
But we're not allowed to talk about it, and we have to use words like two-tier instead of, left-wing tyranny.
Well, considering we've got a woman that's been murdered, maybe going to the police over this post is justifiable in this case.
Let's talk about whether this is justifiable. A Labour minister has demanded that union flags in her constituency be taken down. Sarah Sackman, the courts minister, said some of her Finchley and Golders Green constituents had objected to Union and St George's flags being placed on public lampposts. She's called on Barnet Borough Council, the local authority, to take action, saying residents had described the flags as unsettling, intimidating, and, oh, here we go, this is one from the blimmin' woke Bible, isn't it? Othering.
Oh, God. I mean...
This is our national flag. When I was over in Florida, not only does every blooming building seem to have the American flag, some of them about the size of Texas, and massive things, like standards in the sky like this. Where has it come from, this mad brainwashing? There's somebody who is a courts minister. You'd think she might have, a few brain cells in her head and understand something or two about sensible judgment if you're the minister of the courts, demanding that the national flag is taken down in the constituency.
The vilification of the English flag is frankly absurd. I mean, look, the World Cup's literally just finished and they're already wanting people to take them down. It's insane, and I think actually it goes to the fundamental problem of what's going on in Britain right now, where everyone can't get under one banner. I think Australia and America, as you say, does this really well. Australia does.
Are you flaggy over there?
We're very flaggy. Yeah, we've got a Union Jack in our flag as well.
Do you feel othered by it?
No one does.
Do you feel colonised?
We don't have this problem really over there, because it is sort of, at least we've had it in terms of immigration, we've had our own problems, but we haven't had nearly the same problems that Britain has, in my opinion, because we know that, or we say, you should get under Team Australia. We kind of have an identity that people can get behind, and unfortunately, Britain's become so fractured that people have completely lost their way in that sort of sense. And I can hit Benedict. Do you have an alternate opinion to that? Maybe I'm saying something completely wrong, but I think
Benedict hates flags. He's going to be personally going around the country taking down the national flag.
I feel that they're very gauche, and you shouldn't have to demonstrate where I already know that I live here. I don't need a flag to remind me, although often sometimes I do forget this. But no, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think in the United States and Australia, increasingly these are manufactured nations, as in once upon a time they were not nations and then they became. Whereas... this is the point. This is the point.
I agree with you. I find it funny when people go, stop those boat people from coming to Australia. I mean, we literally, all the settlers did come on boats.
Yeah, and whereas in Britain, I suppose, you've got the flag, I think the fear is that it represents a much more sort of ethnic thing. That's where a lot of the sort of the discontent comes from, A. And the Union Jack flag, B, is the flag of the people that went round settling these places. That's why perhaps it's less of an embarrassing thing for the people in Australia, because, to have it on their flag, because it is literally part of their history. Whereas here, where we're constantly told the British Empire is evil, you have to be reminded that that's a bad thing. So that's my view.
I can't remember who said it, but I've remembered one of my favourite descriptions of Australia for a while.
Here we go.
Because, of course, it was petty criminals, wasn't it? You nicked a loaf of bread in the Victorian era. Yeah. You were put on a boat to go and settle that, magical place on the other side of the globe. And I remember someone once saying that it's Asbo Island.
Oh, my God!
Which I think is just absolutely brilliant.
Someone once said to me, Australia Australia is the Texas of Britain, and I was like, damn you. But anyway, the Texas of Britain. I don't know. It's sort of
cowboys.
Where all the hokey people go. But no, I honestly, I think when I think of Golders Green and Finchley, all I think about is a litany of terror attacks that have happened there towards the Jewish people. And if an English flag is unsettling, I think I can think of other things that are more unsettling in that constituency.
Talking about that, actually, there's a report out today by J7, which are the 7 nations outside of Israel with the biggest Jewish populations. And out of those, we apparently in the UK have the hugest uptick in anti-Semitism, which isn't a surprise. Of course, there was the awful terror attack on Bondi Beach not long ago. But what's fascinating, I'm going through my paperwork, seeing if I can find the copy. I can't. But when you read through this report about this uptick in anti-Semitism that's been written by J7, not once does the word Islam, Muslim or Islamism come into it. It's almost as if all of us in society are somehow becoming Jew haters, you know, by osmosis. That it's nothing to do with the importation of people from countries that frankly want to see Israel wiped off the face of the earth.
Absolutely, and until we actually address that root cause, until politicians want to come to the table and say it like it is publicly as well, we're not going to have any resolve. I mean, you said it on your show on Sunday, just after that horrific incident in Berlin had happened at the Pride March. Not a single politician would like to mention the Islamification of some of the, or extreme Islam in this situation. We had it, of course, after Bondi. I mean, I will never forgive our Prime Minister for not once mentioning that it was an extreme Islamist that had shot and killed those Jewish people while they were trying to enjoy their Hanukkah celebration on the beach. And look, they just want to shy away from it. They don't want to confront it, these politicians. And what they're doing is a world of horribleness for the rest of us. And also, to be honest, for the rest of the Islamic community, because they want to stay far away from the extreme element of Islam. They don't want to be grouped in altogether with it. But they are actually almost being forced to because everyone else is staying silent on it, if that makes sense.
Well, what I'm finding really ridiculous about all of these things, whether it's the anti-Semitic report today, whether it's what's just happened in Berlin, and again, you know, this reticence, all the sort of people online saying, all the sort of, state leaders and leftist politicians going, we've got to stand in solidarity of LGBTQI+, and they keep saying, this is why we need a Pride March. No, it's not. You don't need a Pride March. A Pride March is not going to stop Islamists from wanting to kill you. We need to get to the nub of the problem. And I don't know whether you saw the reports into the horrible, brutal stabbing in France of those 3 young women. One of them was pregnant, and the guy, the assailant, is tackled down to the floor, and while he's lying on the floor, he shouts, Allah made me do it, Allah made me do it. And literally under the copy, it then says, French police are investigating the motive.
Yeah.
And what did the man not tell you?
I know. And they're also blaming mental health, almost to put a lid on it. I know, just from a media perspective, I was keen to report on it, but obviously when you hear when the police are saying it's mental health, then you think, OK. But of course it's mental health. Yes. Of course he's mentally ill, but let's talk about what drove him to that mental illness. And we can see on camera, it's like they're gaslighting the public. We can hear him utter those words in the video that's been shared millions of times. So, I mean, it's cowardice. It's cowardice from the ruling classes not to address it. And the funny, it's not funny, but the very dark humour of it all is that if it was a white nationalist or something like that, God forbid, who committed these sort of crimes, they'd be out for blood. They would be like, we're going to tackle this tomorrow, we're going to get to the root causes, we're going to go to the meetings, which they should, and go and root it out of society. But they don't want to do it, unfortunately, when the shoe's on the other foot.
I feel like we've just got to a stage now you're not even allowed to say the word Islam. It's gone. It's banned. Can't point it out. Samara, thank you so much. It's always fun having you here in the studio. Let's do it more often. OK, we're going to be taking a short break. After the break, it'd be great to speak to some of you. So if you want to phone us, the number is 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send a WhatsApp message. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send a text. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you write your message. We're back just after this.
fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago, he wasn't even an MP. The next, he's holding keys to number 10.
You know what? I'm trying so hard not to be cynical about it all, but I'm trying to keep, not hope. I'm sick of hearing about hope already. He's only been in government for 5 minutes, but I want them to succeed because I want Britain to succeed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I thought I might do some messages, Benny boy, and then before we do some calls.
Well, what if they've
some
got
of them are
things to
quite
say?
good. You'll like this one.
Oh, are they? All right.
Someone who goes nameless says, "Morning, Alex." This was from the morning, by the way. I know. This one came in 2 hours ago, but I've been a bit lackadaisical when it comes to reading messages. Can we not just go to war with France? I think that might be the only way to resolve it at the end of the day. They're sending invaders to our country.
From a
and
Mr.
let's be
A.
right, they have
Hitler.
never liked us. We don't like them. Let's have it.
From a Mr. A. Hitler, Leopoldstrasse of Berlin. Can we not just go to war with France?
You know, we're bored.
Yes, why not?
We've got some domestic issues. Let's go invade France. Seems like a great
yes.
idea.
I mean, it is a time-honoured tradition. So,
It is a time-honoured tradition.
But is there anything in France we want these days? The
Cheese,
Bayeux
wine.
Tapestry is already here. You say that. Because of climate change, our wine industry is now doing fantastically well, whereas
That's
all of
true.
France is on fire. So they're not going to have any vineyards left. And actually, British cheese... You know, Britain's got more variety of cheeses than France does.
I did know that, actually, as it happens.
Yeah, because you're from what part of the world what they make cheese.
Like cheesy part of the
amongst
world.
other things. They
In
make cider
Wales.
where you are as well.
I know.
And they only make cider in northern France, and
In
it's not as
Normandy.
good. Yeah.
And they nicked it from us. The Normans came over, invaded us, saw our cider and went, "Oh, you can do that with apples, can you?"
But
nice.
now we've got the Bayeux Tapestry.
Do you want a side
what else do we
effect?
need? Go on.
Who doesn't want a side effect? And I've got loads. Not a side
People
effect.
with an apple intolerance, but apart from that,
Apart from a side effect,
Yeah.
a side effect.
Roll on, what is it?
So, the rumour has it, the cider rumour has it, in the cider mill, that because cider is covered in all this, apples are covered in all this natural yeast, you don't have to add yeast to make cider, and it just carries on fermenting proper scrumpy if you don't. There's this process called keeving where you wash the yeast off so it sort of ferments at a slower pace and retains some of its sugar. If you don't, anyone who's bought a bag-in-box cider, as I have, I had a bottle of a Papa Scrumpy in the back of my car and I forgot it was there and it exploded. Literally burst. Because that's what happens, and that is how fizzy drinks were invented. And then when the Normans came over and nicked the idea of cider, they also nicked the idea of putting fizz in alcohol and then champagne.
I love
so
that.
there you go.
So
We
basically,
technically invented
champagne was invented because some Norman somewhere left some scrumpy in the back of his horse and cart for a little bit too long and thought, mon Dieu, this could be nothing, but it could be everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All
There
right,
we go.
there you go.
Right, OK, let's get on to calls now. I'm getting nagged in the ear by Ted. No one likes that. Let's speak to William, who's in London. Good afternoon, William.
Thank you, Alex, for taking my call.
Pleasure, my darling. What's on your mind?
There's a couple of things, Alex. It's blatantly obvious. Andy Burnham has just said on national TV and every other TV station and radio station that he's going to invite the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats about social care, but not reform and obviously Farage.
Yeah.
Now, if there was an election tomorrow, Alex, Farage would get 6 or 8 million votes, and he's Burnham, another blunder from Burnham.
Yeah.
He's not invited the main poll leader party.
It's ridiculous, and I don't know. Have you happened to see? I don't know if we've got it in our system actually. This sanctimonious video of Andy Burnham talking about adult social care is such a big issue. We've got to stop. Oh, do you know, we have got it. Oh, here you go. Vom-inducing content warning. Buckets at the ready. Here we are.
Last week, I said we needed a different kind of politics, problem solving, not point scoring. Nowhere is that more urgent than social care. We have to find common ground and listen to others to find a way forward. It's time to draw a line under people playing politics when the human cost of that means carers struggling, families paying the price, and our NHS buckling under the strain. This comes down to a choice. We can carry on passing the problem to the next generation, or we can face it head on and work together to build a care system that gives people dignity, security and the support they deserve.
I mean, there you go. He's there going, well, we can't play politics of adult social care. We've got to get together across party divides, but not with the party who are most likely to form the next government. Make that make sense. It's utterly ridiculous. It is hypocrisy. It is playing politics. It is pathetic. It's playground politics.
Alex, please, can I come back on, Alex?
Yeah.
This guy Burnham is a chancer, OK? He's a chancer, not being rude. And not only that, I'll tell you what else is bugging me about politics now. Yvette Cooper has been Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, and now she's Health Secretary. She's failed in the other two departments, and she's still placed in one of the highest offices, you know, in Parliament. Why is she still around, Alex? Please, can someone tell me throughout this country what she's done that's done anything any good?
Yeah, but this is what is
foreign trade. Please, can someone please tell me? Please.
This is what's so funny about, essentially, the current Labour Party, because how many MPs have they got, Benedict? Stop playing on your phone. You're at work.
403, isn't it?
There you go.
There you
William knew. He's going to sit there next week, not you.
I'd have been Googling it if you hadn't.
William's in London. He can probably get on the tube and make it over. He wouldn't play on his phone. He'd pay attention.
Alex, this is just another extension of the Tories, Labour and the Liberal Democrats, who no one wants. Since the Second World War, these two parties have ruined the British people and what we've always stood for. And they're just collaborating again together without Nigel and Reform UK, you know, who's going to get 6 to 8 million if there was a vote tomorrow. It's just ridiculous. If people can't see that, they are absolutely so foolish.
I think people can see it, and if Andy Burnham thinks he's going to curry favour in the Red Wall, I think he will have another thing coming. Right, William, thank you ever so much for your call. Lovely to speak to you. We've got a new caller on the line next. I always love a newbie. It's Petula. What a great name, Petula. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Now, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm a bit taken back, really. I was just watching Talk TV on television, and I thought, oh, I'm going to phone up about this particular thing on the niqab and whether or not, you know, women are oppressed and all that business. I don't know. In any case, and my view on it, I mean, I don't live in London, so I don't see this an awful lot. I did once go to London, I must admit. I didn't notice a person sitting in the corner, but when they moved, it frightened the light out of me because I didn't realise anybody was there. So now, I mean, things are all changing, aren't they? So if I think about the safety of these people wearing all this full head-to-toe garment, you know, it could be a man, it could be, you know, somebody unsavoury. There could be hiding, you know, things underneath. We don't know. And there's also, you know, questions of how do they cope when they go to see a doctor, hospital, etc., anything like that. You know, security, benefits. How do they prove who they are? How do they cope with that sort of thing? You know, I just think it... I mean, I agree with the France thing, just to ban it. I mean, are these women actually safe? Do they wear it?
But also, it's the whole idea. As a society, we shouldn't be kowtowing to the culture, the frictious culture compared to our own, of foreign countries. We shouldn't be saying, oh, well, you know, if you do that back at home, we're going to let you do it over here. It is, and it's reckless, because the thing is, as soon as you start allowing these things, you give an inch, people start taking a mile. I agree. It should be banned. Petula, thank you for calling. Very first time caller. I love that. So if you've never called the show, then look how easy it is. You just dial the number 03444 991 and Benedict and I will speak to you.
If I'm not looking up champagne, because, you know, you started talking about champagne and then I was looking on my phone at champagne.
Are you fact-checking me in
No, I
real
wasn't
time?
fact-checking, I was buying some. It's totally ridiculous. I trust you implicitly.
Right.
But then I thought, oh, I'm thirsty, and it's quite hot.
Man of the people, Benedict Spence, quenching his thirst live on air by ordering a crate of champagne.
Oh, yes, it was. It was Tashinsha. It was on offer as well.
Get
I might
you.
send you a
How
bottle.
much are they paying
If you stop being, all right, fair enough. If you stop being so mean to me, I might extend some to you.
Right,
How about
thank you.
that? There you go.
Some more messages before we go to the break. Burnham has no mandate to make all these changes he's proposing. The small boats have reduced because the immigrants are using bigger boats. Does he think everyone is blind? Oh, that's hilarious when he turned around in an interview and said, oh, yeah, the Labour's plan is working. The number of boats coming across has gone down. I'm like, it is not working.
Do you know?
Nothing has worked.
There's a little tidbit, and this is a sign, I think, about quite how bad he is at this sort of monotonous drone. Something got missed, though, in his announcement about social care, which I've only just picked up on, which is that he said that we shouldn't have assisted dying in this country we shouldn't have a debate about it, until social care and palliative care has actually been addressed. And I thought, amidst all of that nonsense and waffle, was a common sense thing from a British Prime Minister. Honestly, I was probably...
And I fully agree with him.
Yeah,
well
absolutely.
done for saying that, because it's ghoulish to bring in assisted dying when we're told that the NHS is on its knees, when actually the charities have to fund hospices and end-of-life care.
Frankly,
so I
think,
think, well done, Andy.
Yeah, we were very dismissive of his talking style, which I think is justified, but it's also important to point out when Prime Ministers say the right things, and I think that's a sensible thing.
Oh, you'll be pleased to know, actually, you've sort of got ahead of a message from Russell in Great Yarmouth, because he said, I'm a Tory and I cannot stomach Labour in any shape or form, but you and the other geezer on your show, I'm assuming that's you.
I'm a what?
The other geezer. Champagne-buying geese is what he is. So ridiculously biased against Burnham. It looks amateur. I like your shows and your politics, but back off and be objective, please. You're better than that. If you read this out on air, then bravo to you. Best.
Well, we are
Russell.
objective. I just pointed out something that both of us think is actually a very good principled thing that he's done. So, there you are. What was that chap in Great Yarmouth's name?
Russell.
Russell.
Yeah.
There. How about that? We read it out and we're balanced.
Like back in the 1960s, says Derek in Rugby, I started my apprenticeship working on the tools and spending one full day and 2 nights at college. I had to work Saturdays to make up for the day at college. How times have changed. Once upon a time, we all had jobs as youngsters and didn't have smartphones, slang kits and PIP payments. Alex, trouble is, until the lefties learn about free speech, then Nigel is correct at playing them at their own game, says Steve. Meanwhile, someone's message is going, Alex, I'm sorry, no. This Zach post is utterly abhorrent, calling for the beheading of Nigel, all while poor Anne has not been laid to rest. And Mark in Essex says, to your point on flags, my local Lib Dem council took down all the flags in my village last year. So I bought 2 huge flagpoles, put them in my front garden, and I now have 12 by 6 foot Union flags and a Reform flag flying proudly from them. Good on you, Mark in Essex. So I would say, though, Mark, Essex is sort of deep in Reform land. You know, you're probably safe doing that. If I stuck something like that up in my Lib Dem village, I'd probably, I don't know.
I was going to say, is this the only Lib Dem council in Essex? Because I can't believe that those exist. That's kind of impressive.
Yes, actually, he did say my local Lib Dem council.
Yeah, they must be the only ones. They
There
must
you
feel
are.
really embattled. That must be quite a sight to see.
Yeah, maybe he'll message us and let us know more. OK, we're going to be taking a short break, but we were talking earlier of Andy Burnham insisting that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. The plan, which was, I don't know, write a cheque to France to do nothing but assist in helping these people get over to Britain. Terrifyingly, one of those boats turned up in Eastbourne. That marks one of the longest crossings so far. We're going to be discussing all of that and having a little look at a video from Chris Phillips, who seemed to be suggesting that a French naval vessel in the Channel was trying to fire warning shots at him as he went over to report on all the action in La Manche. A lot to sink our teeth into. That's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
By the way, Chris Philp, love to see that you're out and about making nice little videos in the channel. All the rage these days, isn't it? Look at me being an intrepid reporter. You do realise Nigel Farage was doing that about, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, pointing out that these boats were coming across and everyone was like, don't be so awful, these are poor asylum seekers, isn't this dreadful? Nigel Farage was filming those boats crossing the channel at the very time I think Chris Philp was probably the immigration minister. You couldn't make it up. But anyway, interesting scene. So, Chris Philp goes out with a fisherman to film what is going on in the channel, actively films French Coast Guards providing life jackets and giving the dinghy a little encouraging nudge to make sure it gets across to our side. Yeah, that's where your taxpayers' money's going. Definitely not turning that boat around, is it? Look at it. Absolutely. I mean, it's just the audacity of the French, quite frankly. And yet, what was weird about this whole incident is there was some sort of French naval vessel that decides to make a cameo appearance. And it starts firing live rounds. And Chris Philp's like, this is it, the French, they're firing warning shots. At which point, the French Coast Guard, or the French Navy, have had to turn around and say, no, it's just like a little routine exercise, and we followed all the rules. Here we go. To maintain the high level of operational readiness in the current international context, yeah, we can see that readiness, can't we? Ready to push the boats to the English side of the channel. French Navy units train regularly. Individual combat training is part of the normal operations of a ship on duty. Well, there you go. I feel like Chris Philp's probably slightly disappointed the French weren't firing warning shots. It would have made it a lot spicier.
I was going to say, I think all of us
would have been
a
one-up on Farage.
Yeah, all of us would have found that actually quite entertaining, though, that the average French naval vessel sees a Tory MP and goes, oh, no, absolutely not. Keep out of our territorial waters. We've seen what you've done in your own country. Don't come any closer to us. But, yeah, no, obviously, this is something that's kind of well-known, actually, that they do run operations every now and then. But also, if you do get too close to a military vessel and they give you warnings and that sort of thing, they are within their rights to start taking warning shots at you. I mean, there was a Russian vessel that did that to a couple of British holiday makers in the Channel a couple of weeks ago, actually, that did that because they got too close to it. It's fairly standard because if you're the military vessel, you can't necessarily tell whether or not it is a danger to you or it's a Tory MP, which I suppose are the same thing, really. But yeah.
I mean, look, well done for going out and making these videos, but it all feels a little bit 2020 to me.
It's not as if we were unaware.
This has been going on for years now.
It's not as if we were previously unaware that these people are coming across. It's been made clear to us. So to now have them go and go, look at all of this, isn't it dreadful? It's kind of like, how about that? And as you say, weren't you the immigration minister at one point? Thank you for pointing this out now that you're out of office. But honestly, it's very frustrating, though, that this is still kind of the level that we're at. As you
I love
say,
the fact on the video there. I'm just watching it on the screen.
Saying gunshots,
it's got subtitles. And it's flashing this word. I go, gunshot, 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 using what looks like comic sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, sort yourselves out.
But
could have said like zap,
but this is the thing, though, is that we're still, however many years later, this has been going on for, what, 8 years now? 8 years that this has been de rigueur, to use a French expression, coming across the channel. And there's still not been any sort of concerted effort to stop it. There is no actual effort to push people back or to properly apprehend them and then deport them. We're still in the whole sort of thumb-twiddling, oh no, what are we going to do? Best we'd just give the French a little bit more money and maybe they'll stop
Why are we still playing games that these people are asylum seekers and the IRGC are like, no, they're not.
Yeah,
they're
we know
not,
full well.
They're terrorists.
We know full well that this is
We're
used
sending
by...
them.
Yeah, this is used by foreign state actors. It's used by criminal gangs. This is a route that is only taken by people who don't want to be found.
What more does a Prime Minister of this country need in order to say this is now emergency, this is a crisis, this is all about national security, therefore we get to break international law, therefore we get...
They won't, because actually, first and foremost, to do so is a tacit admission that they don't control the border, and that's the first breakdown of the point of a state. If you're turning around and going, it's an emergency, and we've been doing this for 8 years, you lose an awful lot of legitimacy straight off the bat. You admit that you've been lying to people, that it's not that big a deal, or that they're all genuine refugees. If you then turn around and go, actually, no, this is a national security threat, 8 years you go back and say, so every single one of you was clueless or lying, which, of course, a lot of us do suspect to be the case anyway, but a government's never going to admit to that. So it's going to take something completely different. It will require a different calibre of government to come in and actually admit to this. No Labour Prime Minister is going to do this. And actually, I suspect, even if Kemi Badenoch were to become Prime Minister tomorrow, and as I said, I think she's doing a pretty good job, given, juxtaposed to her predecessors as Tory leader, I don't think she'd admit to it either.
It's, I find it so incredibly hard to understand why successive governments have not stopped this. I just cannot understand the motivation of allowing people who could potentially be terrorists to come into the country and then scattering them, Operation Scatter, into every last corner of the United Kingdom.
Well,
I feel like they actually want us to have a major terror attack.
Labour actively think that the idea of bringing in more people for multicultural purposes is a good thing. You need to remember that ideologically they believe that this is a good thing. When it comes to the Tories, it's a combination of some of them thinking that it's a good thing and others simply not having the backbone to do anything about it, because it sounds a little bit too much like hard work, A, and B, because they don't like being called mean names. This was one of the real issues with the Tories. And, this is, I think, goes right to the heart of what the problem with Boris Johnson was. They were a party obsessed with being loved and absolutely disinterested in governing if that got in the way of positive headlines, positive feedback, positive polling. That's what they cared more about. And they thought if they start deporting people, they start stopping people crossing, they will be called all the mean things, Nazis, fascists. If they start putting people in special detention centres, then, some Labour MP will go with a phone and go, I stood outside a concentration camp in Dover or whatever.
What direction travel do you think Burnham's going to take on this? Because it is probably the biggest doorstep issue. It's been going on for ages. We've had Stop the Boat, Smash the Gangs. Neither of those have been done. Burnham at the moment seems to just be running away from this subject. He's hiding from it. He clearly doesn't have a solution.
Yeah. He knows he can't win on this. He knows that this is something that his
don't even bring it up because,
surrounded.
don't set something out that you're never going to be able to deliver. But he's going to have to address it at some point. And I wonder, actually, I know this is going to sound strange. Basically, I'm hopeful. Probably in vain. It's probably very much misplaced hope. But I remember about 2 years ago, before the Labour government, a friend of mine who's a righty said, well, do you know what? Sometimes the left-wing are able to take right-wing decisions that the right-wing government are not able to take. And said, just you watch me, Starmer will do a better job of stopping the boats than the Conservatives. For that reason alone, they will be able to get away with it somehow. And yet...
That was what I think a lot of them hoped. A lot of them hoped that Starmer would be able to take his reputation as international human rights lawyer, but also former director of public prosecutions, and manage to find a good middle way whereby you could somehow bring in enough refugees that were legitimate, but also get tough on the people smugglers and send the ones that are sort of swinging the lead, send them home. He wasn't able to do that. Ultimately, we have to remember here, the Prime Minister is wedded to his party. And if enough of the backbenchers, as we saw with his attempts to reform things like benefit payments, if enough of them rebel against him, he doesn't actually have half as much power as you might think. Party discipline is not very strong on these
it's why I think
things.
He should call a snap election, because then he can basically identify who those rebels would be and deselect them as candidates. And even if he came back with a smaller majority, sometimes that's more whippable, easier to control.
I absolutely agree with that. And right now, when both Reform and the Greens are wobbling ever so slightly, if he was bold, this would be the moment to go for the jugular. I just don't think he is that bold.
I don't think he is that bold. Right, OK, we've got some breaking news, which is that a Norwegian called Johannes Kongsnes Natland,
I say.
Kongsnes, who's 19 years old, has been found guilty at the Old Bailey of travelling to England to carry out a hit on behalf of an international crime gang backed by Iran. Our good mates over in Iran at it again. Although I doubt he came over on a small boat, being a Norwegian.
He could have done.
They did that. They did that about 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would be a tried and tested method for the average Norwegian who's up to no good. So, who knows?
But there you go, the long arm of Iran everywhere.
Is anybody watching that particular sea route? We're all concentrating on the Channel. Maybe nobody saw him stopping across that part of the North Sea and rocking up in Northumberland. That would be kind of smart. Nobody would expect that, is what I'd say. Well, they caught him, though, so it clearly wasn't that good.
Right, we're going to be taking a break ever so shortly. It's blimmin' hot in here, isn't it?
It is.
The air conditioning's not. I'm sweating. It's whew,
It is a
bit
heat
toasty.
wave. It is that their climate
which is,
change.
you know, very, very difficult for us poor journalists having to sit in this un-air conditioned studio because it must be on the blink, the air conditioning, sweltering our way through a load of hot air coming out of our mouths. But what about farmers? I was thinking this the other day, living in an agricultural area. What are they up against? I mean, I don't know if you saw in France, Benedict, that the farmers of the Gironde and all of the regions around it have been driving towards those wildfires with all of their water for irrigation, all their massive tankers, to try and help put out the flames. I mean, you know, it's well done to the French farmers. Well done for your bravery. I thought that was very touching indeed, and it did get me thinking of, well, how is farming surviving? Is it 40 days now without rain or something like that?
Something nuts.
I ain't moaning, but I'm fairly certain that farmers might well be. We're going to be speaking to Gareth Wyn-Jones, who is a farmer, just after this.
Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago, he wasn't even an MP. The next, he's holding keys to number 10.
You know what? I'm trying so hard not to be cynical about it all, but I'm trying to keep, not hope. I'm sick of hearing about hope already. He's only been in government for 5 minutes, but I want them to succeed because I want Britain to succeed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Now, have you had a little look at the fields out there? It's not so much of a green and pleasant land these days. It's looking a little bit like the savannah, if I'm honest, which got me to thinking, what on earth is going on in the world of farming? Well, I don't know, but Gareth Wyn-Jones should be able to tell us because he is a farmer. Gareth, 43 days, parts of the southwest now, 45 days without rain. How on earth are you managing? What sort of impact is this having on farmers up and down the country?
Hello there. Yeah, look behind me. You can see the colour of that should be the green grass at home in Wales. But yeah, it's like you say, it's more like a desert or a savannah. Yeah, we're used to challenges. This again is another massive challenge for the farming communities and the farming families out there. Crops are down already, you know. A lot of our livestock and dairy boys are already feeding some of their winter fodder to the cows. The people that are waiting for their third cut silage, so we cut the grass then and feed that during the winter to the animals. Well, there's not going to be a third cut for a lot of farmers. So we're just hoping. We've had a little drop of rain here in Wales, not enough. I'm praying, because what we need, and it's going to sound a bit mad, we need a little bit of rain constantly, and so that we don't get it a runoff, because the ground at the moment is like concrete. And behind you, you can see the Carnarvon mountain range, where we've had 4 massive fires this year. We've lost hundreds of acres to the fires, which is good, you know, grazing areas, and it's the same up in Scotland. We've seen it in England and Ireland as well. So I think, you know, farmers, government, and everybody needs to sit down and start to look at the, you know, the whole problem. And really, we need more livestock on the uplands. So we've turned every single sheep we have on our land onto the mountains now, and they're doing okay there. You know, and these areas are very, very used to drought because they're wet areas and they can take it. Our lower ground is struggling a bit. So, yeah, it's challenging, to say the least.
I mean, are there farmers out there who are basically thinking, well, that's it, my whole crop for this year is gone. It's not, you know, how am I going to pay my way?
Don't forget, we get years of this before, from floods to these droughts to, supermarkets pushing prices down as well, and imports. So farmers are used to challenging situations. But this is a pretty intense time now because, you know, there's not a lot of rain in the forecast either, so it's going to be a tough time for many. And let's not forget, our job is to produce food to feed people. So it's really, really important that we can keep carrying on our job, because there's going to be food shortages, there's going to be food inflation. You know, even the European Union are telling people now to store up on canned food and water and things, which is, and this government as well, which is quite scary, really. You know, we're not going to go hungry here, and we want to feed the nation with good, affordable, healthy, nutritious food, and these situations do cause us quite a lot of stress and strain to do that.
Are farmers also coming together as a community to face down these issues? I was talking earlier about, you know, really sort of moving images of lots and lots of tractors with huge water tankers in France heading to the Gironde to try and help the military, try and help the fire services battle those blazes, you know, wearing protective equipment, breathing equipment. I mean, honestly, it made me very emotional watching it. And is that what farmers are doing in the UK to help each other, saying, listen, mate, I've got a big water tanker, you can borrow it, or I'll come and do your crops, you know, for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, you know, it's a community, isn't it? And, you know, if you get a tree falling on a country road, who'll be there first? A farmer. If you get snowed in and you can't get through a road, who'll be there first? Farmers, you know. We're there, part of the community, you know, opening roads, making sure that people, you know, get water to these areas and the moors. A lot of farmers with massive tankers turned up and gave their time, their energy, you know, and it's not something cheap, you know, machines like that costing hundreds of thousands. I really do feel for the farmers in France and Spain at the moment. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. But it does make you think, you know, all these wildfires across our country and across Europe. It's scary times. It is scary times, and we have to look at the whole situation and maybe start to address it by putting livestock into some of these areas to start to graze them and to get rid of some of this brash, because that is fuel for the fire.
There we have it. It's so good catching up with you, Gareth. Look after yourself, look after that land of yours, and let us know a bit later on if things have improved. It must be so hard for the farmers. I was speaking to a French journalist the other day. And she was saying, it's interesting, isn't it? She was saying one of the reasons there are so many wildfires now in the Gironde, it isn't actually the vineyards, because the vineyards are irrigated, because they are spread out. But what environmental campaigners have been doing is normally they go and clear the forest floor of all sorts of loam and rubbish. And they're not allowed to do that anymore because some sort of, you know...
Forestry management is an important part of actually keeping wildfires at bay. Is the
and apparently regulations in France that you can't do that because some sort of, like, you know, lesser spotted bug might lose its habitat. And she was saying, actually, this is why the wildfires have been caused, as well as there's video footage of people deliberately going about setting these off.
That's the thing. There are a couple of things about this, and that is, one, forestry management has not been as good as it needs to be in the last couple of years. And actually that started in the immediate aftermath of the COVID lockdowns. People were not allowed to... You'd have thought out in the wild, would you be absolutely safe safe from an airborne virus like that. But no, there was a massive sort of backlog as a result of people not being allowed to go and do their jobs. That was what caused that then initial uptick in forest fires. Although they have been coming down since then, partly because actually in other parts of Europe in particular, they are they were scarred literally by that particular year. So they're not as many forest fires, wildfires, as they have been in previous years this year. It's simply that we're very attuned to them, and they're obviously very visually striking as well. It's hard to miss a forest fire. Combine that with the temperature, obviously it's always going to feel a little bit more disastrous. But talking about that and how actually it's not the vineyards, for instance, that are catching fire because they are prepared, they're irrigated, they're spaced out. That's what you need. And this is the thing that has always... It's exasperated me about the conversations about climate change.
It reminds
People are not prepared to say climate change may or may not be happening, but let's say hypothetically it is and it's the worst case scenario. You're not going to fix it by going, go back to the Stone Age. You're going to fix it by preparing for things. And that means things like irrigation, building reservoirs, it means things like air conditioning in buildings, and yet the green lobby, the environmentalist lobby, is steadfastly opposed to allowing us to actually adapt to a hotter temperature. That's insane.
I remember the mass flooding in Spain last year because guess what? The EU had come up with a regulation. They had to remove all the dams. So where do you think all that water from the mountains is going to go? That's right, down into the valley, and that was about some sort of fish or something. Hello, Ian.
Hello.
Hi.
Where did you come from? Good Lord.
Well, that's what climate change does. You just sort of appear out of nowhere.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, yes. I mean, I've got no... This is just old ground, really, isn't it? I mean, yeah, climate changes. We know that. Yeah, summer's getting hotter. That's not the question, is it?
Do you want to do a spelling test?
As Benedict was just saying, is this that thing?
The story arc, because we started off while we were waiting for Andy Burnham's
You're asking the wrong person to do a spelling test because of my neurological disabilities.
That, you get PIP payments, do you?
So you could be seen to be taking the mickey out of somebody. I haven't even got a bloody badge for the car yet, but I'm working on it. Go on.
Because basically, Lucy Powell says this is micromanaging kids and this is absurd. Asking schoolies